Chapter 44-42. Devil's Knight shouted. Feng Kuan couldn't bear the powerful soul force and knelt on the spot. Everyone's expression changed. They looked at Devil's Knight in shock, as if they were looking at a monster. Win no matter what, Feng Kuan was a peerless genius with extraordinary willpower. However, in front of Devil's Knight, he was played like a puppet. Feng Kuan knelt on the ground, but he raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. It was obvious that he was trying to resist. However, no matter what, he couldn't stand up. His legs seemed to be immobilized. Kowtow. Moye's lips curled into a cold smile as he spoke indifferently. Then, Feng Kuan actually started to bend down, and his forehead slowly touched the ground. Crowd seeing this scene, shock was written all over their faces. Everyone could see that Feng Kuan was being suppressed by Devil's Knight and was forced to kneel. To be able to do this, it was enough to show how terrifying Devil's Knight was. Heaven couldn't help but frown. This was the first time he had seen someone force someone to become his disciple. Feng Kuan had always been arrogant and unreasonable. Unfortunately, in front of Devil's Knight, he could only kneel and kowtow. Kowtow and become my disciple. Now, you are my disciple. Devil's Knight laughed and released the soul force that he had placed on Feng Kuan. I will tear you apart. However, in the next moment, Feng Kuan broke free from the control and roared. Like a ferocious tiger, he clenched his fist and attacked Devil's Knight. Kuaner, quickly stop. Wind Ghost Ling Yun's expression suddenly changed. He cried out in alarm, but it was already too late to stop him. He wasn't afraid that Feng Kuan would hurt Devil's Knight. He was afraid that Feng Kuan would anger Devil's Knight and be killed by the latter. He had seen Devil's Knight turn the vice leader of Gia's sect into a puppet. How could he be hurt by Feng Kuan? Impudent. Devil's Knight stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression darkened as he let out a low roar, following which he struck out with his palm, breaking apart Feng Kuan's attack. After that, his silhouette flickered and appeared behind Feng Kuan, directly grabbing his neck. Feng Kuan turned pale with fright, but his throat was tightly strangled. His face was flushed red, and he was unable to speak. He didn't expect Devil's Knight's strength to be so strong. The instant it erupted, it was like a landslide or a tsunami. Feng Kuan, do you know how to respect a master like a father? Moye's expression was gloomy and cold as he said in a heavy tone, killing me is the same as killing your father. Even if I kill you now, the leader of the Wind Ghost clan wouldn't dare to say anything. Lord Beacon Emperor, please show mercy. Wind Demon felt the murderous intent in Devil's Knight's eyes and was so scared that his face turned pale as he hurriedly shouted. But he didn't dare to make a move. Not only because Devil's Knight held the secret of the Moonlight Chalcedony, but also because Devil's Knight's strength was too strange. Lord Beacon Emperor, Feng Kuan was just impulsive. Please punish him severely. Don't kill him. Feng Yaoxing also spoke, almost begging. When Feng Kuan's face turned red, under the pressure of the big hand, the blood in his body stopped flowing. But at this moment, other than fear, there was more shock and confusion in his heart. He didn't understand why Wind Demon and Feng Yaoxing would be so afraid of Devil's Knight. This was the meeting hall of the Wind Demon's clan. Even if the leader of the Gia sect came personally, he wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Also, he couldn't figure out Devil's Knight's identity at all. Wind Gui Lingyun and Feng Yaoxing addressed Devil's Knight as Lord Beacon Emperor. This was too strange. Wasn't Feng Tian's sect's Beacon Emperor Nye Tian? When did he become Devil's Knight? And Devil's Knight's appearance was too similar to Nye Tian's. Were they brothers? Questions lingered in his mind. Feng Kuan even forgot that his life was still in someone else's hands. Nye Tian watched quietly at the side. He didn't speak, nor was he anxious. He knew that Devil's Knight couldn't possibly kill Feng Kuan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent so much effort to treat the latter. Demon Knight must have a deeper reason for being interested in Feng Kuan. Perhaps he wanted to make Feng Kuan into another Soul Lattice puppet. Devil's Knight's face was gloomy, but he still released Feng Kuan in the end. This time, Feng Kuan didn't dare to move. He He looked at Devil's Knight in fear. He was obviously more afraid than when he saw Nietion. It's good that you know fear. Devil's Knight sneered and said to Wind Demon, Wind Demon clan leader, let him stay by my side for this period of time. Okay. Although Wind Ghostling Yun was somewhat reluctant, he still nodded in agreement. Feng Kuen's expression was a little fearful, but he didn't dare to speak. Then Devil's Knight said a few more things to Wind Demon before leaving with Nietion. Nietion and Devil's Knight brought everyone out of the Wind Demon Valley. Their visit to the Wind Demon's clan this time was more daunting than dangerous. At least, the final result was acceptable. However, Devil's Knight's sudden appearance caught Nietion off guard. The Fengtian Soul Sect's appearance also brought a great threat to the unstable Fengtian Fate Sect. This time, Nietion could be said to be truly faced with internal and external troubles. Nietion, there is bound to be a fight between us for the position of Beacon Emperor. However, for the sake of the Fengtian Sect, I don't want both of us to suffer losses. How about we have a fight between gentlemen? Devil's Knight suddenly said when they were about to reach the Fengtian Fate Sect. A fight between gentlemen? Nietion frowned and couldn't help but find it funny. Demon Knight was such a despicable person, yet he still brought up the idea of a gentleman's dispute. Yes, Devil's Knight laughed with a strange light in his eyes. The fight between us for the position of Beacon Emperor is not only about us, but also the future of the Fengtian Sect. If that's the case, why don't we give the right to compete to our respective sects? What do you mean? Nietion frowned with a dark expression. It's very simple. You and I will each choose 3 disciples from our sections. We'll fight each other in pairs. 2 out of 3 wins. Moe smiled again. He couldn't help but glance at Feng Kuan. Nietion's expression sank and immediately fell into silence. Devil's Knight's suggestion was a good idea. Once the Fengtian sect was unified, there could only be one Beacon Emperor. However, Nietion wasn't completely confident in fighting against Devil's Knight. No, if he chose someone from the sect to fight, it would be a great risk. Indeed, the Fengtian Fate Sect had many outstanding disciples, but they weren't very strong. They couldn't even be considered top geniuses in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. But Devil's Knight could casually accept disciples. Furthermore, he could accept very strong disciples, such as Feng Kuan. Just think about it. Wen Luan already had a hard time defeating Feng Li. So how could he fight against Feng Kuan? How about this? We can broaden our choices. Not only can we choose cultivators from the sect, we can also choose cultivators from other places. At this time, Devil's Knight seemed to have seen through Nietion's doubts. He laughed and said, but there is a prerequisite. The cultivators must be young and below 10,000 years old. Chapter 44-43. Nietion looked at Devil's Knight, fell silent for a moment, and then nodded. Since he had broadened his choices, Nietion felt that his chances would be greater. Feng Kuan was strong, but if he fought against Tang 13, what would his chances of winning be? Okay, it's a deal. Devil's Knight smiled happily, looking very proud of himself for having succeeded in his scheme. Nietion frowned, feeling a little worried in his heart. Demon for Knight to be so confident. It meant that he already had a suitable candidate in mind. Could it be that Devil's Knight had a genius stronger than Feng Kuan? Very soon, Nietion and the others arrived above the Heaven Beacon Mountain range. Nieheaven originally wanted to bring Devil's Knight to meet the higher-ups of the Fengtian sect. After all, as the Beacon's emperor, Devil's Knight shared the same origin as the Fengtian sect. After returning to the Fengtian sect, it was better to get to know each other. Yet the sky was a bit strange. It seemed that Devil's Knight came alone and there was no one else from the Sky Beacon Soul sect around him. But yes, Devil's Knight only roughly observed the Heaven Beacon mountain range before preparing to leave. Where are you going? Nietion was curious and couldn't help but ask. I want to pay a visit to Gia's sect, and we'll be back in a few days, Devil's Knight said with a faint smile. Visit the Gia sect? Nietion's expression changed when he heard this. Demon Knight had just gotten into a conflict with the people of Gia's sect and refined the vice-sect leader of Gia's sect into a soul puppet. Now, he was going to pay a visit to Gia's sect. Wasn't he courting death? Don't worry. Since I dare to go to Gia's sect, I have absolute confidence that I can return safely. Of course, Devil's Knight knew what Nye Tian was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, "Didn't you want to exchange the life of Gia's sect's fourth elder for someone? If you trust me, then give me the fourth elder. I will use him to exchange for the person you want." No. Before Nye Tian could speak, Wen Luen took a step forward and rejected him coldly. But Devil's Knight didn't even look at him. His eyes stared straight at Nye Tian, waiting for Nye Tian's answer. Okay. Nye Tian thought for a while and finally agreed. IV the elders were indeed used in exchange for warmth, and Nye Tian did not trust Devil's Knight. But thinking about it, the fourth elder was captured by the Devil's Knight, so the Devil's Knight probably wouldn't play any tricks. Wen Luen's expression was gloomy, but he still handed the fourth elder over to Devil's Knight. Tang, 13. Just as Mo was about to leave, he paused and looked at Tang, 13. With a teasing smile, he said, "The thing inside your body is strong enough. You won't be able to suppress it soon." The seed of the Yellow River. Nye Tian's eyes flashed, and he screamed in his mind. Demon Knight could tell that there was a seed of the Yellow River inside Tang, 13. Knowing the next moment, he calmed down. Devil's Knight had 9 soul pulses. His soul's power was so strong that even peak alchemists and array masters couldn't compare. It wasn't strange that he could see Tang 13's abnormality. "You don't need to worry," Tang 13 responded coldly. Devil's Knight smiled and said, "I have a way to suppress it. If you can't handle it, you can find me. But I have a condition." "What condition?" Nye Tian's expression darkened, and he walked up. "I chose 3 people, and Tang 13 is one of them." Mo smiled faintly. After he finished speaking, his figure flashed, and he left. Nye Sky and Tang 13's expressions froze. They couldn't react for a while. So, Devil's Knight had his eyes on Tang 13 and wanted her to fight on his behalf. But this way, wouldn't Tang 13 become Nye Tian's enemy? "You want me to fight on his behalf? In your dreams." After a while, Tang 13 laughed brightly, as if she didn't care. Nye Sky's expression was cold. He was really considering whether to make Tang 13 agree to Devil's Knight's condition. Huang, the seed of the Yellow River, contained Apocalypse 13's 3 souls of the Yellow River. They wanted to take over Tang 13's body. Devil's Knight had the strongest fate, which meant he had the strongest soul. Maybe he could really suppress the souls of the Yellow River. "Nye Tian, I won't fight for him." Tang 13 knew what Nye Tian was thinking and said calmly but firmly. If he had to betray his friends, he would rather be taken over. Nye Tian inhaled deeply and smiled bitterly. He was too naive just now. With Devil's Knight's personality, even if Tang 13 agreed to his condition, would he really take care of the seed of the Yellow River for her? Perhaps he would turn Tang 13 into a soul puppet. Very soon, Nye Tian and the others returned to Feng Tianming's sect. Nye Tian didn't want to tell them about Feng Tianming's sect right away. He wanted to wait until Lung Shuang Wuchen was done with his closed-door cultivation. As for the alliance with the Wind Demons clan, he only asked Fan Zhong to inform the other banner leaders and elders. Then, Nye Tian and Tang 13 went to the mountain gate that Feng Tianming's sect had arranged for them. The two returned to their own rooms. "Nye Tian, are you worried about Devil's Knight?" In the room, Nye Tian was restless. Fat Cat's voice sounded. "Yes." Nye Tian nodded. Devil's Knight's sudden appearance completely messed up his original plan. He had already thought about expanding the Sky Beacon selection to the entire All-Heaven Sacred World. This way, while it was risky, it would also provide an opportunity for Feng Tianming's sect to rise. As for the enemies that might be attracted, Nye Tian was also on guard. When the Sky Beacon sect selection began, they would inform some experts in advance to stand guard for the Sky Beacon sect. Only the Sky Beacon selection could be completed without the appearance of the Human Emperor Palace. Even if the Human Emperor Palace really did appear, Feng Tian's sect could at least protect themselves. After all, they had the Sky Beacon stone statues. But Devil's Knight suddenly appeared and dragged Feng Tianming's sect into it. Nietian had never imagined that there would be such an internal problem. Devil Knight's appearance meant the start of the battle for the Beacon Emperor. If Nietian lost to Devil's Knight, then the Fengtian sect would have to give up. I don't understand. Why didn't he choose to fight me head-on? Why did he insist on a gentleman's competition? Nietian frowned in confusion. In his opinion, Devil's Knight's strength was almost unbeatable. Ghost, although Yin Qing wasn't a peak expert, he was still in the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Yet, he was turned into a puppet by Devil's Knight. That was too terrifying. Devil Since Knight was so powerful. Why didn't he fight Nietian head-on? Nietian asked himself. At least, he didn't have the confidence to defeat an expert like Yin Qing. According to Devil's Knight, he wanted to unify the Fengtian sect. He didn't want both sides to suffer losses. But this didn't seem to make sense. If it was a battle between Nietian and Devil's Knight, it wouldn't hurt the foundation of the Fengtian sect, no matter who won. Nietian, do you think Devil's Knight is really as powerful as he looks? Fat Cat asked again. Chapter 4444. What do you mean? Nietian was confused when he heard Fat Cat's words. Could it be that Devil's Knight isn't as strong as he looks? Nietian, think about it carefully. What did Devil's Knight rely on to defeat that sect master? Fat Cat asked with a strange expression. Soul runes and a strange formation. Nietian frowned. He still didn't understand what the little Fat Cat was trying to say. Soul runes are a type of spiritual energy. The formation also said, as for forcing Feng Kuan to kneel, he also used spiritual energy. Nietian understood what Fat Cat was trying to say. You mean that Devil's Knight relied on divine soul power? His real strength isn't that strong. That's right. Fat Cat nodded and smiled. But he did control Feng Kuan in an instant. Nietian frowned. He was confused when he recalled how Devil's Knight controlled Feng Kuan. The two of them were very close at that time. They were competing on reflexes, movement techniques, and martial body power. Fat Cat smirked. Can't you also control Feng Kuan in an instant at that distance? Nietian's eyes shone with excitement as he said, That's right. It seemed that Devil's Knight wasn't as strong as he looked. Nietian could control a low-level, heavenly martial divine ancestor in an instant if they were at a close distance. Wen Feng Kuan was a heavenly perception divine emperor. His martial body wasn't as strong as a low-level, heavenly martial divine ancestor. Devil's Knight's divine soul power is so strong that even a heavenly martial divine ancestor can't resist it. Can I? Nietian was confused again. If a martial artist wants to defeat an opponent with the power of their soul, under normal circumstances, they need to have a soul power that far surpasses their opponent. Fat Cat's expression changed slightly before she said seriously, Devil's Knight has 9 soul veins, so his mental power should be at the ancient rank already. Judging from the way his divine soul suppressed Feng Kuan, his psychic power should be around 60 ancient. 60 ancients. When Nietian heard this number, his expression changed. The size of one's mental power was determined by the initial rank, followed by the trillion, and then the ancient. 1 ancient 10 trillion, 1 trillion 10 levels. Demon Knight's spiritual energy had actually reached 60 ancient. This was simply too terrifying. He knew that some of the greatest alchemists and formation masters in the sacred world were only in their 50s or 60s. Logically speaking, the limit of a sage realm martial artist's mental power should be 100 ancient. However, it was extremely difficult to improve one's mental strength, especially in the later stages. And moreover, most martial artists who specialized in mental energy did not have a high martial Dao realm and a limited lifespan. Institute even a peak alchemy master and array master would only have 50 to 60 ancient mental energy. Demon Knight was so young, yet he possessed such a terrifying mental strength. It could be said to be terrifying. In the early days, Nietian had also cultivated spiritual energy, but later on, he mainly focused on martial arts and swordsmanship. Therefore, his psychic energy wasn't very high. Now, it should only be around 10 ancient souls. However, for a 9th level heavenly tribulation martial artist, 10 ancient mental strength was already considered very abnormal. 60 ancient psychic power is indeed very frightening, but it's definitely not to the point of being unbeatable. The fat cat laughed and said, spiritual power is not a very destructive power to begin with. No matter how strong a spirit is, it can't destroy a mountain. Nyetian couldn't help but nod. God soul power was mainly useful for things with souls, such as martial artists and sacred beasts. But for some inanimate objects, such as rocks and soil, the effect of soul power was very small. Small fat cat nodded slightly and continued. Even for cultivators, spiritual attacks are relatively weak. Only when your mental energy far surpasses your opponent can you deal a destructive blow to them. Therefore, with your 10 ancient mental energy, the possibility of Devil's Night being able to deal a heavy blow to your soul is not high. Yin Qing's mental energy shouldn't be weaker than mine, right? How could he be refined into a puppet by Devil's Night? Nyetian frowned and asked in confusion. As a martial artist's realm increased, their mental energy would naturally increase as well. Heaven A 9th level Saint Ancestor Wu's mental energy should exceed 10 ancient souls. Indeed. The fat cat nodded and said that sect master was refined into a puppet by Devil's Night. One reason was because of carelessness, and the other was because Devil's Night's soul matrix runes and formations were too strong. That means that if Devil's Night released his soul matrix runes and formations, it would be very difficult for me to resist. Nyetian's eyes trembled as he asked in shock. Of course not. The fat cat shook its head and said, the strength of a spiritual attack is not only related to the strength of a martial artist's mental energy, but also the martial artist's willpower and martial physique. Devil's Night and you share the same origin, so his soul matrix runes are not much of a threat to you. Moreover, your willpower is much stronger than that sect master's. In addition, you have the Eternal Night Demon Fox, so it's impossible for Devil's Night to defeat you with his soul matrix runes. Heaven's eyes immediately became blazing, and he slowly understood. Demon Knight should have known about this long ago, so he chose to avoid a direct battle with Nyetian and suggested a gentleman's competition instead. Heaven Nyetian understood. The fat cat smiled again and said, Nyetian, you have the strongest martial fate. This is true strength. Your martial physique is far stronger than Devil's Knight's, so in a direct battle, he is definitely no match for you. Yes. Nyetian nodded his head heavily, his eyes sharp and full of confidence. At this moment, he finally realized that he had almost given birth to an inner demon, one apart from talent and hard work. A martial artist's martial will was more important. Heaven's martial will had always been tenacious and fearless. But this time, when he faced Devil's Night, he felt timid. One must know that even when he faced Yang God Sword Emperor, Hayakuten, and the others, and even when he faced Human Emperor, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. Fortunately, the fat cat was there to guide Nyetian. Otherwise, if Nyetian had an inner demon, it would be troublesome. But in fact, this was nothing. After all, Devil's Night was born from Nyetian's inner demon. When Nyetian faced Devil's Night, it was naturally different from when he faced others. From a certain point of view, when Nyetian fought Devil's Night, it was like fighting himself. It was easy to beat others, but difficult to beat oneself. Nyetian calmed down, and a confident smile appeared on his face. Small the fat cat successfully guided Nyetian and did not say anything else. He went to rest. Nyetian took a deep breath and prepared to cultivate. He wanted to see if he could find an opportunity to break through to the heavenly insight realm. But at this moment, a shrill scream was suddenly heard. It was extremely ear-piercing. Tang 13. Upon hearing Tang 13's voice, Nyetian's expression flickered as he dashed out. Chapter 44-45. Inside a room of the mountain gate, screams of agony could be heard. It was like the cries of ghosts in the night. Dream Will Talk Star. Nyetian dashed out of his room and arrived at Tang 13's room. What he saw stunned him. Inside the room, Tang 13 was holding his head with both hands. His face was a bloody mess, and his eyes were cold. In the dark, they were frightening. Nietion's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the seed of the underworld inside Tang 13's body was acting up. My head hurts, it hurts. Tang 13 grabbed his head with both hands. He clawed at his head, creating lines of blood. It was as if he wanted to rip his head open. He felt like there were thousands of needles piercing his head. He wanted to rip his head open and pull out all these annoying needles one by one. Tang 13, calm down. Nietion stepped forward and held on to Tang 13's arms so that Tang 13 wouldn't be able to hurt him anymore. But this made Tang 13 even crazier. His eyes changed color and the eye of the ghost was activated. Not good. Nietion's face changed color and he retreated. A ray of eye powers flashed by and left a deep wound on his face. Even his facial bones were cut off. Luckily, he reacted fast enough, or else this eye blade would have sliced off half of his face. The damage caused by the eye of the ghost was something that even Nietion, who had the 10th meridian, couldn't heal instantly. Enduring the pain, Tian rushed over and grabbed onto Tang 13 tightly. He pinned Tang 13 to the ground. Roar! Tang 13, on the other hand, was completely enraged. He let out a beast-like roar. Terrifying energy exploded from his body, and he tried to break free from Nietion. However, Nietion was far too powerful. No matter how hard Tang 13 tried, he couldn't break free. Nietion, you can't stop me. Just then, Tang 13 let out a low growl. Her two arms were broken and blood dripped down her arms. Mori Shire. Nietion's eyes widened. How could he not tell that this was not Tang 13's voice, but Mori Shire's? You didn't expect this, did you? You're unable to suppress my Yellow Springs soul so quickly. Ha ha ha. Mori Shire laughed crazily. His body resisted forcefully, disregarding everything else. No, this will hurt Tang 13. Nietion saw that Tang 13's body was covered in wounds. If he didn't let go, Tang 13's body would be torn in half. None helpless, Nietion let go of Tang 13. Nietion, should I thank you for giving me an even more powerful martial body? Tang 13's face was covered in blood. Her eyes were as deep as the abyss as she stared at Nietion. The voice that came out of her mouth was Mori Shire's. Mori Shire, don't you dare take over his body. Nietion let out a low roar as he opened his demon eye. A demonic destruction seal shot out and attacked Tang 13's soul. Tang 13's body quivered, and she staggered back a few steps, almost losing her balance. In the next second, however, he stopped and snickered. Nietion, you are hurting Tang 13's soul, not mine. If you want to continue, then bring it on. Nietion's face was dark as his brain spun. This continuing was not a solution. He had to find a way to suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. But the soul of Yellow Springs was hidden deep inside Tang 13's soul. To suppress or destroy it was impossible, unless he disregarded Tang 13's soul and destroyed it. But if he did that, Tang 13 would become a soulless person, no different from a walking corpse. But with Nietion's current level of spiritual energy, it was not enough to destroy Tang 13's soul. Nietion, are you thinking of destroying the soul of this body? Mori Shire laughed maniacally again. You can do that. But let me tell you, the one you will destroy in the end is Tang 13. Without Tang 13, I still have other souls of Yellow Springs. Can you find them one by one and destroy them? Ha ha ha. The maniacal laughter fell into Nietion's ears, making him anxious. What if I kill Tang 13 directly? Nietion suddenly took a step forward as a bold idea occurred to him. Tang 13 was a Star Lord. Even if he was killed, he could use the Forbidden Star Soul to be reborn. In the past, Tang 13 also died and was reborn using the Forbidden Star Soul. Nietion, you cannot take the risk. But at this time, the fat cat's voice sounded, the Forbidden Star Soul cannot be reborn indefinitely. Tang 13 is in a special state now. If his body is destroyed, his soul will most likely be devoured by the soul of Yellow Springs. Then what should we do? Nietion's face darkened. He did not know what to do. Difficult. Should he just watch as Mori Shire takes over Tang 13's body? Right now, the soul of Yellow Springs is only temporarily awake. It is not time to take over yet, the fat cat said in a low voice, making Nietion become cold. Yes. Nietion nodded. The sword intent in his body surged, and he activated the 12 heaven-slaying sword array, trapping Tang 13. Under the impact of the 12 heaven-slaying sword array, the entire courtyard was destroyed. Even the entire mountain gate was shaking and on the verge of collapse. The huge commotion alerted people from the nearby mountain peaks. Many martial artists showed up and looked at Nietion and Tang 13 with puzzled expressions. Who are these two guys? What are they doing? They should be fighting, and it looks like it's quite an intense fight. That silver-haired kid looks familiar. I think he's the guy who defeated Gia's sect not long ago. At this time, most people still didn't know Nietion's identity, but they had already recognized Nietion. They thought it was a battle between Nietion and Tang 13, and they thought it was going to be exciting. Nietion, you can't trap me. Inside the sword array, Tang 13 dashed left and right like a wild beast. In the blink of an eye, the sword array was broken into pieces. It looked like it could not hold on much longer. This sword array won't last much longer. Nietion frowned. Mori Shire didn't care about anything else as he tried to take over Tang 13's body. Just like that at this moment, a white holy light suddenly appeared in the sky. Heaven and earth are nothing special. Heaven and earth saints seal. Following which, a loud and clear voice could be heard as a gigantic handprint appeared, descending from the sky like a mountain. Nietion instantly felt the heavy pressure, but he didn't panic. Instead, his silhouette flickered and he retreated. Boom! In the next second, the gigantic handprint landed. Heaven and earth shook, and the giant mountain gate shook as if it was about to collapse. Tang 13 raised her head, wanting to say something. However, her body shook and she collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. Tang 13. Nietion's silhouette flashed, and he held Tang 13 up. He's fine. He just fainted. High up in the sky, a soft voice rang. Chapter 44-46. Nietion was overjoyed to see that it was Gu Ling Wuji. Speaking of which, he and Gu Ling Wuji had a deep relationship. Back then, during the Hidden Dragon battle, Nietion saw Gu Ling Wuji for the first time at the Haoyan auction house. Due to fate, the latter helped Nietion a lot. Moreover, Gu Ling Wuji and Nietion had a lot of connections. Gu Ling Wuji was one of the two sects of the Fengtian sect, while Nietion was the Beacon Emperor. This relationship was obvious. Gu Ling Wuji was also EMO and Nie Qingwan's teacher and a good friend of Qing Qi. Only back then, Nietion never revealed his identity as the Beacon Emperor. Only previously, Nietion didn't know that Gu Ling Wuji was the sect master of the Fengtian sect. He only sensed the Beacon Emperor's imprint on the latter and knew that the latter was a high-ranking member of the sect. Gu Ling Wuji had left the sect for many years. This time, he must have heard about the Fengtian selection. The Fengtian selection was a major event of the sect. Even though Gu Ling Wuji had left the sect for many years, he didn't forget his identity. Nietion. Gu Ling Wuji was surprised to see Nietion. He smiled. I didn't expect you to be here, too. Nietion nodded and smiled. He was a little embarrassed. Gu Ling Wuji clearly didn't know his identity as the Beacon Emperor. Gu Ling Wuji landed and glanced at Tang 13. He nodded. Your friend's situation isn't too optimistic. Senior Gu Ling, what did you see? Nietion knew that Gu Ling Wuji was an alchemist. In terms of alchemy, he was considered one of the top figures in the all-heaven sacred world. Perhaps he had a way to save Tang 13. Dang. Gu Ling Wuji had given the 9 Origin Fate pill to Nietion before. There's an extremely powerful spiritual force in his body. It's dark aura. It should be trying to take over his martial body. Gu Ling Wuji's expression wasn't good. This spiritual power made Gu Ling Wuji feel very strange. He had done some research on spiritual auras and had seen countless kinds of strange spiritual auras. However, the soul inside Tang 13's body was something he had never seen before. This it did not seem to be a remnant soul, but a divine soul that was constantly growing stronger. But yes, in a body that did not belong to him. How could his soul become stronger? Generally speaking, the soul depended on the existence of the body. Therefore, when a martial artist's martial body became stronger, the soul would naturally become stronger as well. Dang, however, there were exceptions. For example, some souls that had reached a certain level of strength could break free from the limitations of the body and exist independently. But when the soul left the body, it could only maintain its original state at most. It was impossible for it to become stronger. The strange thing about Tang 13's divine soul power was that even without a body to rely on, it could still continue to grow stronger. It even posed a great threat to the divine soul of the original owner of the body. Of course, Guling Wuji had seen some examples of remnant souls seizing the bodies of martial artists, but those were all remnant souls lying dormant, waiting for the body's original owner to be weak before seizing the body. Don, the divine soul, in 13's body, was forcefully possessing him. This was too strange. Senior Guling, can I have a word with you? Tian saw that Guling Wuji was deep in thought. He decided to tell him about Tang 13's situation and see if Guling Wuji had any ideas. Let's go to Ai's Wuchi Peak. Guling Wuji looked around and said with a smile, Okay. Tian saw that they couldn't stay here anymore, so he happily agreed. Film a moment later, the two arrived at the Wuchi Peak. None the Wondrous Peak was one of the main peaks of the school, but it was far away from the other peaks in a secluded area. I never liked noise, so he chose this place. Guling Wuji came to a familiar place and couldn't help but feel sad. His expression was slightly strange. Near the heavens could tell that Guling Wuji had recalled many things in the past. I have been away from the sect for so many years, but the sect is still able to preserve Wuchi Peak. I'm very pleased. After a while, Guling Wuji calmed down and laughed heartily. Pick with that. Nie Tian placed Tang 13 flat on a blue stone table. Guling Wuji walked over and examined her carefully. He said, Nie Tian, tell me about your friend. Nie Tian nodded and told him about Mori Shire and the seed of Yellow Springs. The seed of Yellow Springs, the soul of Yellow Springs. After listening to Nie Tian, Guling Wuji's expression was a bit gloomy. He said in a low voice, I has lived for so long, but this is the first time I've heard of something like this. Senior, do you have any ideas? Nie Tian looked at Guling Wuji with anticipation. Not yet. Guling Wuji shook his head and said, My Chinquin sacred seal has the effect of suppressing one's soul, but the soul of the Yellow Spring inside Tang 13's body is too terrifying, and it's growing rapidly. I'm afraid that the next time the soul of Yellow Springs acts up, even Ai's seal of heaven and earth won't be able to suppress it. Although Nie Tian was mentally prepared, he was still very disappointed when he heard Guling Wuji's answer. Senior, how long can the seal of heaven and earth last? Taking a deep breath, Nie Tian asked. At most, 3 days. Guling Wuji frowned and looked helpless. When he first cultivated the sacred art of heaven and earth, the seal of heaven and earth was said to be able to suppress souls, but he didn't expect that it couldn't suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. Nie Tian, don't be too anxious. There's still 3 days. I will study the soul of Yellow Springs in these 3 days. Maybe I can find a way. Seeing Nie Tian's reaction, Guling Wuji guessed Tang 13's importance to Nie Tian and comforted him. Thank you, Senior Guling. Nie Tian nodded and bowed to express his gratitude. All right, Nie Tian, why are you at Feng Tianming sect? Guling Wuji suddenly remembered something and asked with a strange expression. Take a look at my fate, Senior Guling. Nie Tian couldn't help but say with a smile. Guling Wuji was startled. His divine sense moved and sensed Nie Tian's fate space. His expression immediately froze as if he was petrified. You are the Beacon Emperor? After a while, Guling Wuji spoke again with a trembling voice. Before coming to Feng Tianming sect, he had already heard that the sect had found a new Beacon Emperor. But he didn't expect the new Beacon Emperor to be Nie Tian, whom he already knew. He could clearly sense that Nyetian had 9 life veins in his body. Wasn't this the Beacon Emperor? Nyetian nodded with a smile. He purposely hid his 10th life vein to avoid scaring Guling Wuji. It's you. Guling Wuji felt his mouth go dry and gulped with a startled expression. Ugh. He had been with Nyetian for 9 years, but never realized that Nyetian was the Beacon Emperor. Senior Guling, where are Emo and Nyechingwan? Nyetian suddenly thought of Emo and Nyechingwan. They are at the academy. Guling Wuji calmed down a bit and said, I is their teacher, but he can't always take care of them. That's true. Nyetian nodded and smiled. He suddenly remembered something and asked, Senior Guling, do you know about Feng Tianming sect? Please remember this book's domain name. Biaoshu. Calm. Chapter 44-47. Feng Tian Soul Sect. Guling Wuji's expression changed after hearing Nyetian's words. He seemed to be panicking and asked, How do you know about the Soul Sect? It seems that Senior Guling knows about it. Nyetian didn't expect this reaction from Guling Wuji. He nodded and told him about Devil's Night and the Feng Tian Soul Sect. The Soul Sect also has a Beacon Emperor. Guling Wuji was even more surprised after hearing Nyetian's words. Nyetian nodded and couldn't help but be confused. With Guling Wuji's temperament, he shouldn't be this excited. It's finally here. Guling Wuji was silent for a moment before sighing. He seemed to have aged a lot in an instant with a helpless expression. Nyetian had a strange expression and didn't understand what Guling Wuji was talking about. Guling Wuji sighed again and said, Actually, before I left the Feng Tian Fate Sect, I was ordered by the sect to visit the Feng Tian Soul Sect. Visit the Feng Tian Soul Sect? Nyetian's expression changed with shock. Original. Not only did Guling Wuji know of the Feng Tian Soul Sect's existence, he even visited them. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded. At that time, the Feng Tian Fate Sect was in a state of rapid decline. Someone suggested to let the Feng Tian Soul Sect return to the sect and rebuild the Feng Tian Sect to revitalize the Feng Tian Sect. After some discussion, we decided to send me to visit the Feng Tian Soul Sect. But at that time, the Feng Tian Soul Sect had been in seclusion for a long time. I had to search for a long time before finally finding news about the Soul Sect. When I finally found it, there were only a few dozen people in the entire sect. A few dozen? Nyetian frowned and shook his head. A few dozen? The Feng Tian Soul Sect was a part of the Feng Tian Sect, after all. It didn't make sense for there to only be a few dozen people. The Feng Tian Fate Sect had been in decline for a long time, and there were still hundreds of thousands of people in the sect. Guling Wuji helplessly nodded. Although there are only a few dozen people left in the sect, they are all powerful experts. I intended to recruit them and guarantee that they will become protectors or elders once they return to the sect. Moreover, the Feng Tian Fate Sect would be renamed to the Feng Tian Sect. This way, it could be considered as the unification of the two sects, rebuilding a complete Feng Tian Sect. But those dozens of people were very stubborn. Not only were they unwilling to return, but they also joined forces to injure me. However, they didn't kill me. Instead, they told me that the Black Soul Sect would definitely wait for their Beacon Emperor. Furthermore, their Beacon Emperor would unify the Feng Tian Sect and revive the Beacon Sky. At this point, Guling Wuji couldn't help but let out a long sigh. They said that this is the prophecy of the Soul Sect, and it will definitely come true. After so many years, I almost forgot about this prophecy. Who would have thought that they would actually find their own Beacon Emperor? After saying that, Guling Wuji's expression was a little strange. He looked at Nyetian hesitantly. The Soul Sect finding the Beacon Emperor might not necessarily be a bad thing for the Feng Tian Sect. Nyetian nodded and said, As long as the Feng Tian Sect can be revived, it doesn't matter who the Beacon Emperor is. He was a little puzzled. What Guling Wuji said was actually nothing much. If this prophecy was true, it would not be a bad thing for the Feng Tian Sect. It's as a matter of fact. Nyetian wasn't too greedy towards the Beacon Emperor. He wasn't someone who craved power anyway. Only this Beacon Emperor could not be given to the Devil's Knight. Demon Knight was the person who understood Nyetian the most in this world, and Nie Tian was also the person who understood Devil's Night the most in this world. With Devil's Knight's dark and ruthless personality, once he took control of the Feng Tian sect, he would probably develop the Feng Tian sect into a huge killing machine. Or perhaps the Feng Tian sect would really rise, but this rise would definitely be unimaginably bloody. Nie Heaven didn't understand why Gu Ling Wuji's expression was so heavy just because of this prophecy. Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and hesitated for a long time before finally saying, "The soul sex prophecy doesn't stop there. What else?" Nie Tian's gaze darkened. It seemed that things weren't so simple. The soul sex people said that the Fate sect and the soul sect will both find their own Beacon Emperor. However, the two Beacon Emperors will fight for the Beacon Emperor's position, and their Beacon Emperor will kill our Fate sect's Beacon Emperor and become the true master of the Beacon Sky. Guling Wuji's gaze slightly trembled, and he seemed a little excited. Yet Tian frowned, but didn't have much of a reaction. The so-called prophecies all carried a strong sense of destiny. And he, Nie Tian, had never believed in destiny. Looking at the current situation, the soul sex people were indeed right. Both Beacon Emperors had appeared, and it was extremely likely that a life and death battle would break out. However, it was still unknown who would win and who would lose this battle. Devil's Knight was very strong, but he, Nie Tian, wasn't weak either. Indeed, it's only a prophecy. It was I who took it too seriously. Feeling Nie Tian's confidence and momentum, Guling Wuji couldn't help but calm down. He took a deep breath and returned to normal. "Senior Guling, don't worry. My life is tough, and I won't die so easily." Nie Tian laughed with an indifferent expression. "Yes." Guling Wuji nodded his head. Then he thought of something and couldn't help but laugh. "There's another strange thing about the soul sect prophecy that I still can't figure out." "What is it?" Nie Tian laughed and asked. "The soul sect people said that the Beacon Emperor that the soul sect and the Fate sect are looking for is the same person." Guling Wuji frowned and said with a smile, "At that time, I was thinking that since it's the same person, then isn't this person the Beacon Emperor of the two sects? How could there be any struggle for the Beacon Emperor? Now, it seems that the soul sect's prophecy was wrong. The two Beacon Emperors have already met. Isn't it absurd to say that it's the same person?" After saying that, Guling Wuji couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. He felt that he was too absurd to actually believe in such nonsense. However, in the next moment, Guling Wuji realized that Nie Tian's expression had changed. His expression slowly stiffened, as if he was thinking about something. "Lord Beacon Emperor, what's wrong?" Guling Wuji sensed that something was wrong. His heart that had just calmed down became anxious again. Nie Tian's gaze was deep, and he didn't speak for a long time. "Lord Beacon Emperor, could it be that you and the Beacon's Emperor are really related?" Seeing this, Guling Wuji suddenly had a bad premonition, and his voice was trembling. Nie Tian took a deep breath and finally opened his mouth, telling him about the matter between him and the Devil's Knight. After listening to Nie Tian, Guling Wuji's expression immediately changed. He took a deep breath and was speechless. Demon Knight was derived from the body of Nie Tian. It wasn't wrong to say that the two of them were the same person. And from Nie Tian's narration, there was indeed a predestined entanglement between him and the Devil's Knight, and there would definitely be a battle of life and death. Bit by bit, the prophecy of the soul sect was all correct. Then didn't this mean that Nie Tian would die in the hands of the Devil's Knight in the struggle for the Beacon Emperor? Please remember this book's domain name. Biaoshu. Calm. Chapter 44-48. For a moment, Nie Tian and Guling Wuji didn't speak. The atmosphere was dead silent. "Senior Guling, I don't believe in fate. I only believe in myself." After a long time, Nie Tian spoke in a heavy tone. "Fate is not decided by the heavens. Man can overcome the heavens." Guling Wuji's expression changed slightly. He nodded and didn't say anything else. "Senior Guling, I'll have to trouble you with Tang 13's matter." Nie Tian regained his composure and bowed slightly. The prophecy didn't mean much to him. Tang 13's problem was the most pressing issue. "Yes." Guling Wuji nodded. He suddenly thought of something and said, Beacon Emperor, maybe the Beacon's Emperor can save your friend. Devil's Knight? Niatiin couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He helplessly told Gu Ling about the fight between him and Devil's Knight. He also told him about how Devil's Knight was willing to save Tang 13, but wanted her to fight on his behalf. I see. Gu Ling Wuji frowned and fell into silence. He didn't think that the fight between Niatiin and Devil's Knight for the Beacon Emperor would be decided by the so-called fight between gentlemen. This way, Niatiin and Devil's Knight could be avoided. It was a good thing. However, this didn't mean that there wouldn't be a fight between Niatiin and Devil's Knight. It was only a fight to the death for the Beacon Emperor. Senior Gu Ling, do you know where the stone statues in the sect came from? At this moment, Niatiin thought of the Heaven Beacon's stone statues and asked, Stone statues? Gu Ling Wuchi was surprised at first. Why are you asking about this all of a sudden, Beacon King? It's like this. When I was strolling around the mountain gates, I saw these stone statues and felt that they were a little strange. After a closer look, I realized that the stone statues were filled with life and spirit runes. Even the arrangement of the stone statues is arranged according to the formation, so I'm very curious, Niatiin nodded and said. Gu Ling Wuji was a little surprised. He did not expect to find so much information from the stone statue. These statues have existed since the founding of the Heaven Beacon sect. After a pause, Gu Ling Wuji's eyes turned strange as he asked Niatiin, Sir Beacon Emperor, do you know how many peaks there are in total? I don't know. Niatiin shook his head. He really didn't pay much attention to this. 720. Gu Ling Wuji smiled and said, Among them, there are 52 lone peaks, 309 double peaks, and 50-odd peaks. Among them are 108 perilous peaks, and among the perilous peaks are 36 forbidden peaks. As he spoke, Gu Ling Wuji stared at Niatiin and said, Sir Beacon Emperor, do you understand anything? These numbers seem to coincide with the acupuncture points of the human body. Niatiin nodded. He naturally understood the hidden meaning behind Gu Ling Wuji's words. The human body had 9 yuan meridians, 12 meridians, and 720 acupuncture points. Among the 720 acupuncture points, there were 52 single points, 309 double points, and 50-odd points outside the meridians. Among them, there were also 108 vital acupuncture points and 36 death acupuncture points. The Heaven Beacon sect mountain gates were almost the same as the acupuncture points of the human body. This was clearly not a coincidence. That's right. Gu Ling Wuji laughed and leaped tens of thousands of meters into the sky. Niatiin did not know what Gu Ling Wuji was going to do, but he immediately followed. Sir Beacon Emperor, what can you see from here? Gu Ling Wuji waved his hand and swept away the clouds in the sky. He looked down at the entire sect and laughed. Niatiin's eyes were like torches, allowing him to see the entire Heaven Beacon sect. A moment later, his expression changed. He was so shocked that he froze on the spot, unable to react for a long time. Gu Ling Wuji already knew that Niatiin would have such a reaction, so he wore a faint smile on his face. Not to mention Niatiin, anyone who saw the entire Heaven Beacon sect will be shocked for a long time. Looking down from above, the entire Heaven Beacon sect looked like a giant lying on the ground. The 720 mountain gates were like the giant's acupuncture points, and the paths between the gates were like the giant's meridians. The entire Heaven Beacon sect was clearly a person. It was no wonder that Niatiin was so shocked by such a shocking scene. Senior Gu Ling, are you saying that the entire Heaven Beacon sect was built according to the structure of a human body? Niatiin finally reacted after a long time, but his eyes were still focused on the ground. With a closer look, Niatiin found that the ridges and rivers between the mountain gates were like the bones and blood of the giant. They were all connected, giving off the feeling that this giant could stand up at any time. One had to admit that the Heaven Beacon sect's image was too shocking and impactful. Yes, Gu Ling Wuji nodded with a smile, then put on a mysterious expression. Actually, the overall structure of the Heaven Beacon sect is not as simple as it looks on the surface. Beneath the entire mountain range, there are also underground streams that symbolize the 9 elemental veins. This Tian couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air and was momentarily speechless. A mountain with a human body was too terrifying. However, Guling Wuji smiled again. Not only are there 9 origin veins, there are also 9 soul veins and 9 life veins. Tian's pupils constricted. He was completely dumbfounded. It wasn't hard to build a human-shaped formation. As long as there was a rough outline, then the important parts of the human body were used as the basis, and the power of the formation was enough. In the past, Tian had seen formations that used the human body as the basis, or were similar to the human body. However, this was the first time he'd seen something as large as the Heaven Beacon sect, so complicated and intricate that it even had origin veins, life veins, and soul veins. It was hard to imagine who created such a large and intricate formation. After a long time, Tian's expression finally improved. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. It seemed that he didn't understand the Fengtian sect at all. If Guling Wuji hadn't shown him, he would never have discovered this secret. But at this time, Guling Wuji's expression was a bit strange. He hesitated for a moment before speaking in a low voice. "Sir Beacon Emperor, I have seen the entire formation diagram of the Fengtian sect. Although it's only an incomplete part, it shows that there is something that represents the soul within the formation." Soul? Tian's expression flickered again, and his eyes went wide. The Heaven Beacon formation was shaped like the human body. Not only did it have meridians, but it also had origin veins, life veins, soul veins, and even the soul. But how was this possible? The soul was formless and formless. How could it appear in the formation? Chapter 44-49. After a long time, Tian calmed down slightly, but his eyes were still filled with shock. Guling Wuji said, "When I was young, he was very interested in the sky beacon formation. Unfortunately, his talent was limited and he could not comprehend the formation. Not to mention the sky beacon formation soul. He could not even find a lifeline and soul vein." Tian nodded and let out a long breath. He asked, "Senior, this sky beacon formation is so huge and exquisite. Who built it?" Such a huge, sacred formation was far from comparable to the vast cloud sacred city's protective formation. Furthermore, this formation was shaped like a human body, so it was definitely not simple. "I do not know either." Guling Wuji shook his head and said, "Some say that it was built by the first Beacon Emperor. Some say that it was left from the primeval era, and the first Beacon Emperor brought some formation masters to repair it. Some say that the formation was formed from the body of a fallen giant. Anyway, there are many different opinions and no conclusion." Tian could not help but smile and said, "If this formation was formed from the body of a giant, then this giant is too big." The entire Sky Beacon mountain range was thousands of miles long. Could there be a giant that was thousands of miles long? Not to mention the primeval dragons. Even the legendary primeval Cloud Kuan did not have such a huge body. "Lord Beacon Emperor, let's go down." Guling Wuji let out a faint smile and waved his hand, summoning clouds to form a natural barrier around the Sky Beacon mountain range. "Senior, the secret of the Sky Beacon formation has not been discovered yet. It should be because of the clouds, right?" Tian could not help but ask as he followed behind Guling Wuji. "The clouds are only a small part of the reason. The real reason is the Sky Beacon formation itself." Guling Wuji laughed and said, "The special formation runes in the Sky Beacon formation can affect a cultivator's 5 senses. Ordinary people cannot see through the Sky Beacon formation." "Then why can I see through it?" Tian asked curiously. "Because you have the Beacon Emperor's mark." Guling Wuji smiled and said, "Those with the Beacon Emperor's mark can ignore the Sky Beacon formation's influence." "I see." Tian immediately understood and said, "Doesn't that mean that only the upper echelons of the Fengtian sect know about the Sky Beacon formation?" "Yes." Guling Wuji nodded and said, "After all, the Sky Beacon formation is too shocking. It might not be a good thing if too many people know about it." Tian nodded in agreement. Even he was shocked when he saw the Sky Beacon formation, let alone the others. When the two landed, Tian calmed himself down and asked, "Senior, Are these stone statues the runes of the sky beacon formation? You could say that. Guling Wuji nodded and said, the runes engraved on these stone statues contain a terrifying power. However, after so many years, no one knows how to activate the stone statue anymore. Nie Tian had a helpless expression. As Fat Cat said, the Fengtian sect did not know how to activate the stone statue either. What about the Soul sect? Nie Tian thought of Devil's Night and told him about how Devil's Night refined Yin Qing into a soul puppet. Guling's face turned pale with fright after hearing Nie Tian's words. Really? Nie Tian nodded heavily. He saw it with his own eyes. How could it be fake? Moreover, the formation that Devil's Night used was very similar to the sky beacon formation. It should be the same type of formation. Before the Fengtian sect split, those who knew about the sky beacon formation were all from the Soul sect. Guling Wuji's expression darkened and said, the Soul sect cultivates the heavenly path soul lattice, and their mental strength far surpasses ordinary people. Most of the Soul sect elders are very accomplished in the Tao of formations and Tao of pills. When a Soul sect left, they should have taken a lot of research materials about the sky beacon formation with them. After so many years, it is not strange for the Soul sect to have some understanding and breakthroughs in the sky beacon formation. Nie Tian deeply agreed and said, Devil's Night is the beacon's emperor and has 9 soul veins. His mental strength and divine soul are both at the peak level. With his comprehension ability, he might have really comprehended the sky beacon formation. Nie Tian suddenly remembered that when Devil's Night came to the sky above the sky beacon mountain range, he only took a glance and left. Now that he thought about it, Devil's Night was most likely in the sky beacon formation. It was just that at that time, Nie Tian did not sense anything and did not see the sky beacon formation. Guling Wuji nodded silently with a look of deep worry on his face. If Devil's Night could control the sky beacon formation, then he would have a huge advantage. If that happened, Nie Tian would not be able to compete at all. Nie Tian didn't think too much about it, and instead asked, Senior, do you have a way to strip the soul patterns from the statues? About that, I has not tried it before. Guling Wuji was stunned and said with a puzzled expression, why is Lord Beacon Emperor suddenly asking about this? Nie Tian did not hide it and said, when Tang 13 and I examined the stone statues earlier, Tang 13 had a strange feeling about the runes on the stone statues. So I guess that the soul grid runes on the stone statues can help him suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs. Guling Wuji's eyes became hot, and he said with joy, that is a good idea. Why didn't I think of it? The soul grid runes on the stone statues were left behind by generations of Fengtian sect experts and possessed extremely strong divine soul power. If he could activate the divine soul power contained in the soul grid runes, he might really be able to suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs. All right, let's go and try it now. Before Nie Tian could say anything, Guling Wuji could no longer hold back and rushed out excitedly. Nie Tian immediately followed, and the two came to a stone statue outside the mountain gate. Guling Wuji looked at the stone statue in front of him and took a deep breath. He pressed one hand on it and released his divine soul power, wanting to forcefully strip the soul grid runes. What a strong divine soul power! Nie Tian felt the aura on Guling Wuji and was instantly shocked. He did not expect Guling Wuji's divine soul to be so terrifying. Judging from the aura, it seemed to be not much weaker than Devil's Night. After a while, Guling Wuji raised his palm, and a mysterious light surged in his palm. It was a soul grid rune. It's up! Nie Tian's eyes were burning with joy. He did not expect Guling Wuji to really strip the soul grid rune from the stone statue. Guling Wuji chuckled and put away the soul matrix rune before he said, I'm one of the few in the sect who cultivates both the fate and soul matrices. Nie Tian was shocked. He did not expect Guling Wuji to cultivate both fate and soul. It's a pity that I does not understand the soul grid rune on the stone statue and can only strip it off directly. Guling Wuji frowned and said, this method is too barbaric and consumes a lot of the divine soul. With my ability, I can only strip a few runes at one time, and I cannot guarantee the completeness of the rune. It's really embarrassing. Senior, please don't say that. It's already very good to be able to strip the soul grid rune. Nietion smiled and said excitedly, "Why don't we try now and see if this soul grid rune can suppress the soul of the Yellow Springs?" Chapter 4450. Although Guling Wuji had only stripped off one of the spirit lattice runes on the stone statue, Nietion already felt that it was not bad. Comto at the very least, he could use this rune to see if the soul lattice rune had any effect on the soul of Yellow Springs. Guling Wuchi and Nietion came to Tang 13's side. The latter was still unconscious. Nietion sensed for a moment and confirmed that Tang 13's breathing was steady and there was nothing out of the ordinary. He nodded and signaled Guling Wuji to begin. Ancient Ling Wuchi nodded solemnly and took a deep breath, appearing slightly nervous. He twirled his palm in the air and carefully guided the soul lattice seal into Tang 13's body. Boom! The moment the inscription entered her body, Tang 13's body trembled slightly. A low rumbling sound could be heard as a layer of white light appeared around her body. It was as though her soul had left her body. Not good. Seeing this, Guling Wuji's face changed as he exclaimed in shock. Raising his hand, he quickly removed the runes from the spirit lattice. "Senior Guling, what happened?" Things changed too quickly. Nietion didn't understand what was going on, but seeing Guling Wuji's strange expression, he couldn't help but ask nervously. Ancient Ling Wuchi first inspected Tang 13's condition. Only after confirming that there was nothing wrong did he relax. Letting out a long breath, he said, "The runes of the soul grid really do affect the spirit of the Yellow Springs. If the runes are strong enough, there's a chance that the spirit of the Yellow Springs will be forced out. But the soul of Nether has already grown. If I force it, I might force Tang 13's soul out her body." This. Nietion's expression changed, and he froze on the spot. If Tang 13's soul and Hades' soul were forced out, wouldn't this body become a soulless body? Currently, if we want to use the soul lattice runes to force out the soul of Yellow Springs, we must first find a way to strengthen Tang 13's soul. Guling Wuji thought for a long time and said, "Or when Tang 13's soul is forced out, we can guide it back into the body. Which method is safer?" Nietion's eyes trembled as he asked. "Both methods are risky, but the first one is relatively simpler." Guling Wuji pondered and nodded. "We still have 3 days. Qingqi should be here soon. Let's have a good discussion then. Senior Qingqi will be coming as well." "That's great." Nietion was overjoyed when he heard that Qingqi was coming. With the help of Qingqi and Guling Wuchi, the chances of saving Tang 13 will increase. And furthermore, if Qingqi came, the other star venerates might come as well. This would be a great stabilizing factor for the wind beacon selection. Nieskai temporarily handed Tang 13 over to Guling Wuji and then returned to his room. In the room, Nietion sat cross-legged and quickly entered a state of cultivation. Nietion hoped that he would be able to break through to the Heaven Perception stage before the selection of the Heaven Flame Tower sect began. Come to think of it, he had already stayed in the 9th level of Heavenly Tribulation for a period of time. While for ordinary people, it was normal for them to stay in the 9th stage of Heavenly Tribulation for decades, centuries, or even tens of thousands of years. However, Nietion was different. Ever since his rebirth, his cultivation speed had been extremely shocking. Nieskai circulated the 9 extremes War God art. The power in his body circulated like a surging flood, boundless and boundless like the starry sky. A cultivator's cultivation was originally a heaven-defying path. They used their own strength to fight against heaven and earth. With the higher a cultivator's realm, the stronger they became, the more terrifying their martial body would become. Basically, when a cultivator reached the sage realm, their martial body would age extremely slowly. That was why Sage Realm cultivators could live for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. And moreover, the martial body of a Sage Realm cultivator was also extremely strong. Even a landslide or tsunami would not be able to hurt them. As for Peak Sage Realm cultivators, they could even use their martial body to resist the space-time storm of the Sage Realm. Nieskai's realm was the 9th level of heavenly tribulation, but the strength of his martial body surpassed most sky martial sacred ancestors. It was basically comparable to a high-level sacred ancestor. And when Tian activated the god-demon body, his martial body was enough to fight against a peak sacred ancestor. The power in Tian's body circulated like raging waves, flowing through his limbs and meridians, washing away the impurities in his martial body. At the same time, it was also a kind of training for his martial body. Gather the Yuan meridians and break through the limits of the heavenly tribulation. Tian roared inwardly. Immediately, the power of the 9 heavenly tribulations surged out of his body like raging dragons. In the blink of an eye, his 9 Yuan meridians rumbled, as if they were about to tear his martial body apart. Intense pain spread throughout his body. Tian was drenched in sweat, but he ignored it. Instead, he circulated the power of the heavenly tribulation even more frantically, wanting to break through the limits and ascend to heavenly perception. The heavenly perception Holy Emperor awakened the power of heavenly perception in a cultivator's body. They would have a new perception and understanding of heaven and earth. Not only could it improve the cultivator's martial body, but it could also improve the cultivator's understanding and control of power. Nieskai endured the pain in his body and continued to break through the limits of the heavenly tribulation. Faintly, he seemed to feel that there was a strange power within his body. It was like a thin membrane that covered his 9 Yuan meridians. It's the heavenly perception barrier. Tian was overjoyed when he felt the existence of this membrane, although the heavenly perception realm was a new realm to him. However, he had fought with many heavenly perception martial artists, and Fat Cat had also systematically and in detail explained the heavenly perception realm to him. Sky, the heavenly perception barrier, was the obstacle to breaking through to the heavenly perception realm. At the same time, it was also a sign of a breakthrough. Only when a martial artist was extremely close to the breakthrough point, the heavenly perception barrier would appear. Nieskai was a little excited. The power of the heavenly tribulation in his body was like a dragon or a tiger, surging and fierce, constantly attacking the heavenly perception barrier. However, the thin layer of barrier was extremely tough. No matter how hard Tian attacked, it could not be broken. No unknowingly, Tian's entire body was drenched in sweat. His veins were bulging, and there were even godly demon inscriptions at the corner of his eyes. Tian, don't be anxious. Use your heart to feel the heavenly perception barrier. Hold your breath and attack with all your might, Fat Cat suddenly said. His deep voice resounded in Tian's mind like a clap of thunder. Sky Tribulation, Heavenly Perception, and Sky Martial Arts realms were collectively known as the Paragon Saint Realm. For ordinary martial artists, when they reached the Paragon Saint Realm, even breaking through a small realm was a huge bottleneck, let alone breaking through a large realm. Many talented martial artists had to go through dozens of failures to break through to the Heavenly Perception Realm. Niet was already very good that the Heavenly Perception barrier appeared on his first attempt. Small Fat Cat did not expect Tian to break through on his first attempt. He only hoped that Tian would have a clearer understanding of the Heavenly Perception barrier, so that he could build a foundation for his next attempt. But at this moment, Tian's body suddenly shook, and a cracking sound rang out. When Little Fat Cat heard this voice, its eyes widened, and it was instantly stunned. This sound was clearly the sound of a barrier breaking. Could it be that Tian had broken through? Chapter 44:51. Fat Cat suddenly heard the sound of a barrier being broken. It was very clear. He was shocked and stunned. Could it be that Tian had broken through the barrier of heaven's perception on his first attempt? Fat Cat was just thinking that it didn't matter if Tian couldn't break through the barrier this time. At least he could build a foundation for his next breakthrough. He didn't expect Tian to break through the barrier successfully. But at that moment, Niet Tion's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body tilted and he fainted. What's going on? The sudden situation surprised Fat Cat. He didn't know what was going on. Niet Yiming had broken through the barrier successfully. He should have advanced to the heavenly insight realm. Why did he faint instead? Given the strength of Niet Tion's martial body, it would take a terrifying amount of power to knock him out. Could it be that something happened to Niet Tion when he broke through the barrier? Fat Cat was shocked. After he calmed down, he carefully sensed Niet Tion's martial body, but didn't find anything strange. But the strange thing was that Niet Tion didn't advance to the heavenly insight realm. He was still in the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation realm. How is this possible? Fat Cat was shocked and confused. Just the sound of a barrier breaking just now was definitely the sound of someone breaking through the barrier. Since he had broken through the barrier, he should have advanced to the heavenly insight realm. Why was he still in the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation realm? Small Fat Cat was unwilling to give up. He checked Niet Tion again, but still didn't find anything strange. The Ghost Emperor isn't here. Otherwise, someone would have discussed it. Fat Cat couldn't help but think of the Ghost Emperor. What's going on? Only after half a day did Niet Tion finally wake up. However, his entire body felt very weak, and he even felt a little dizzy. Half a day was an extremely long recovery period for Niet Tion, who had the 10th vital meridian. Even if he was seriously injured, half a day would be enough for him to fully recover. But now, he could actually recover. Niet Tion, what happened just now? Fat Cat asked eagerly when she saw that Niet Tion had woken up. I don't know. Niet Tion, however, shook his head. He recalled the moment before he fainted and said, I sensed the existence of the heavenly perception barrier, so I did as you said and gathered my strength to break it. I saw myself breaking through the heavenly perception barrier, but in the next instant, an even larger barrier appeared and directly attacked my Yuan meridian, causing me to faint. Another barrier? Little Fat Cat was shocked and stunned for a moment. In order to break through to the heavenly insight realm, one only needed to break through the heavenly insight barrier. Why was there another barrier after breaking through the barrier for Niet Tion? Could it be that there was another hidden barrier behind the heavenly perception barrier? That was this hidden barrier, the second heavenly perception barrier, or something else? That barrier pressed down on my Yuan meridian, causing my vital meridian to circulate slowly. Niet Tion took a deep breath and felt that his breathing was much smoother. His Yuan meridian and vital meridian had also returned to normal, but he still didn't understand. What was going on? The Fat Cat didn't speak for a long time. Clearly, she couldn't explain. After a while, Niet Tion felt that he had recovered quite a bit. He took a deep breath and said, Why don't I try again and see if I can break through the second barrier? Don't mess around. The Fat Cat shouted in shock and hurriedly stopped Niet Tion. That the second hidden barrier was too terrifying. A light pressure could make Niet Tion faint for half a day. It was no small matter. It would be too dangerous to touch that mysterious barrier again without knowing what was going on. The Fat Cat explained to Niet Tion. The latter calmed down and gave up on trying to break through again. Then in the next 2 days, apart from arranging some sect matters, Niet Tion mainly dealt with the Beacon Sky selection. He focused on his own cultivation. After adjusting his martial body to its best condition, Niet Tion was ready to try again. But before he was ready to start, he sensed a familiar aura, which made him pleasantly surprised. Pushing the door open, 2 figures appeared in front of Niet Tion. It was Guling Wuqi and Qing Qi. Senior Qing Qi, Senior Guling. Niet Tion saw the two and greeted them enthusiastically. Niet Tion, I already know about the Feng Tian sect. Qing Qi said calmly, but you're so high profile. I'm afraid you'll attract many enemies. This is an opportunity for the Feng Tian sect. I'm confident that as long as I'm in the Feng Tian sect, I won't be afraid no matter how many enemies come. Niet Tion was very confident and smiled faintly. Qing Qi nodded and said, Guling showed me around just now. I didn't expect the Feng Tian sect to have such a deep foundation. I've only heard that the Heaven Beacon sect once ruled the all-heaven sacred world for a short period of time in the past. I thought it was just a short-lived sect. Now that I'm here, I realize that the Fengtian sect is not to be underestimated. Nietian nodded slightly, not surprised by Qing Chi's reaction. Qing Xia's a formation master. He could naturally see the terror of the Beacon Sky formation. With the Beacon Sky formation, once it was activated, even the human emperor's palace might not be able to take down the Fengtian sect. Feng the Beacon Sky formation was also Nietian's confidence. Although the formation could not be fully activated, the stone statues were enough to protect the sect in times of danger. Senior Qing Chi, have you seen Tang 13? How is she? Nietian was more concerned about Tang 13's situation. Qing Chi might have a way, but Qing Chi's expression didn't look too good. He shook his head and said, I has already seen it. The yellow spring soul in his body is too terrifying, and it is still growing. Just now, I and Gu Ling worked together and used the soul lattice runes to suppress the soul of Yellow Springs. However, they won't be able to suppress it for too long, at most a few days. Could it be that I can only turn to the Devil's Knight for help? Nietian frowned and sighed in his heart. Tang 13 was still unconscious. If there was no other choice, he would have to ask Devil's Knight to help. There's still some time. We're not in a desperate situation yet. Qing Chi forced a smile and comforted Nietian. Nietian could only laugh bitterly. In his opinion, they were almost at the end of their rope. Seniors, there's something I don't understand, and I'd like to consult you about it. Nietian suddenly thought of the heavenly perception barrier, and so he explained the entire matter. Outside of the heavenly perception barrier, there's another barrier. This is unheard of. Gu Ling shook his head with a confused expression. It was obvious that he had never heard of such a thing. Qing Chi, on the other hand, was silent for a long time, as if he was thinking about something. Senior Qing Chi, could it be that this hidden barrier is something? Nietian saw that Qing Chi's expression was strange and asked with a heated gaze. Qing Chi lifted his head to look at Nietian. He seemed to be a little hesitant, but in the end he opened his mouth and said, I have indeed heard of something like this, but I don't know how trustworthy that person is. Who? Nietian's eyes flickered as he asked curiously. Chapter 4452. Nietian's heart tightened when he saw the change in Qing Chi's expression. Hayakuten. Qing Chi hesitated for a while before saying the name. Ultimate Martial Evil Heaven. When Nietian heard this name, his expression couldn't help but change. He was extremely surprised. He didn't expect the person Qing Chi mentioned to be Hayakuten. Jiwu Shitian was the previous Sacred Lord, Dongwang Zhengrong's 9th star emissary. He was also the strongest Star Lord, Lonely Sky Star, Lord Ziwei. And Hayakuten also had a taboo identity, the dark side of Dongwang Zhengrong. Strange Qing Chi's expression changed. So this matter was related to Hayakuten. Nietian calmed down and asked in a low voice, What did he say, Senior Qing Chi? Qing hesitated for a while before saying, Nietian, don't ask for now. I will tell you when the time is right. Nietian frowned. He wanted to say something, but stopped in the end. Nietian, don't try to break through to the heavenly enlightenment realm for now. Qing Chi looked at Nietian and said seriously. Nietian was somewhat confused. Don't tell me that there's something wrong with the second ward? Qing Chi's expression was strange. The second barrier wasn't simple. Perhaps. Qing Chi sighed. It's better not to touch it before we get to the bottom of it. Fine. Nietian nodded helplessly. It seemed that the second barrier did have its own secrets. Qing's attitude was the same as Fat Cat's. They clearly didn't want Nietian to take the risk. Beacon King, have you decided on the location for the selection? Gu Ling asked after noticing the strange atmosphere. Not yet. Nietian shook his head. The news of the Sky Beacon selection has spread to the various sacred realms. It will officially start in about half a month. Senior Guling, what do you think is the most suitable location for the venue? Guling Wuji pondered for a while and said, The Sky Beacon selection has caused a huge commotion and will definitely attract the attention of various forces. The Sky Beacon selection must be held in a place we can control. Nietian nodded in agreement. Phone for the heaven selection to reach this stage was no longer a simple matter. This time, in addition to some forces from the sacred world of 7 cultivators of true virtue, other forces would also participate. There were even many forces from mid-rank, high-rank, and even top-rank sacred worlds. Therefore, the location of the sky beacon selection was extremely important. Once something happened, the Fengtian sect had to control it immediately. Since Guling Wuji asked this question, he must have a suitable idea in mind. Sir Beacon Emperor, what do you think about the strength of these forces in the 7th cultivator of true virtue? Guling Wuji did not directly say it, but rather asked in a somewhat inexplicable manner. Very strong. Nie Tian nodded and said, the 7th cultivator of true virtue is only a low-rank sacred world, but the forces in this sacred world are not weaker than many peak forces in high-rank sacred worlds. This point made Nie Tian feel a bit strange. 7, the sacred world of true virtue, was only a low-rank sacred world, but its peak experts were actually close to the peak of the sky martial realm. It must be known that in many high-rank sacred worlds, there were very few sky martial sacred ancestors. However, the Gia sect, the Heaven Beacon sect, and even the Wind Demons clan and the One clan all had many sky martial sacred ancestors. This was indeed puzzling. The reason why the 7th cultivator of true virtue is so strong is inseparable from its special location. Guling Wuji laughed and explained, the various sacred world of the sacred world are divided into top rank, high rank, mid rank, and low rank. This division is based on the location of the sacred world. According to the region, the 7th cultivator of true virtue is a low-rank sacred world. However, its location is very unique. It's right at the core of the primary saint domain cluster. And in this core area, there was a huge unique space-time that connected top saint realm, high saint realm, intermediate saint realm, and elementary saint realm. This special space-time is called the Heavenspan region. The 7th cultivator sacred world happens to be in the heavenly passage domain, so its space-time is connected to the Muyun sacred world, Huangyu sacred world, and Nanwang sacred world. Tian immediately understood and said, in that case, the space-time of the 7th cultivator of true virtue's sacred world is actually no different from the top sacred world, the southern brilliant sacred world, right? The saint power in the space-time is still slightly weaker than in the southern brilliant sacred world, but is far stronger than ordinary elementary sacred worlds. It is about the same as ordinary advanced sacred worlds. Guling Wuji faintly smiled and continued, it is precisely because of the special geographical location of the 7th cultivator sacred world that this sacred world has always been a place that major forces have to fight for. Could it be that the Gia sect has an even greater force supporting it? Nie Tian frowned and had an ominous feeling in his heart. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said, for the Gia sect to be able to rise in such a short time, there must be a major force supporting it from behind. Over the past millions of years, the sacred world has not remained the same. Instead, it has been slowly evolving. Although the evolution of the sacred world is very slow, its influence is huge. Some people have already felt that the connection between the various sacred worlds is getting closer and closer, and the major sacred worlds are slowly getting closer. Getting closer? Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned and somewhat confused. They're getting closer. Guling Wuji nodded and said, some people have already measured it and found that the distance between the various sacred worlds is slowly shrinking. Therefore, tens of thousands of years ago, some people proposed the theory that the sacred worlds are collapsing, which is called the collapse of the heavens theory. Moreover, by observing the evolution of the various sacred worlds, they came to the conclusion that the speed of the collapse of the heavens is accelerating. Nie Tian and Qing Qi were stunned at the same time. The two of them had never heard of such a shocking theory. For example, if the collapse of the heavens was real, it would probably cause great panic in the sacred worlds. Guling, the all-heaven sacred realms have been connected since a long time ago. If the all-heaven sacred realms are really collapsing, does that mean that the all-heaven sacred realms will once again become one? Qing Qi frowned and voiced his thoughts. If the sacred worlds are only merging into one, It's not a big deal. It might not even be a bad thing. Guling Wuji smiled bitterly and said, but according to the current speed of the collapse, the sacred worlds are not merging into one, but will rapidly merge together. At first, there might be a collision between the sacred worlds. After that, the colliding sacred worlds will merge into one, and the space-time inside will collapse and merge. The final result is very likely to be a space-time black hole. Space-time black hole. Nie Tian and Qing Chi's eyes trembled at the same time. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said heavily, if the space-time black hole is the final destination of the sacred worlds, then all living beings in the sacred worlds will be completely annihilated. Chapter 4453. Annihilation. Nie Tian and Qing Chi's expressions changed at the same time when they heard the last two words. Guling Wuji went silent for a moment before letting out a long sigh. Guling Wuji pondered for a moment before letting out a long sigh. Some people have already deduced the theory of the collapse of the heavens many times, but the final result was the annihilation of the heavens. Qing Chi calmed down a bit and couldn't help but ask, Guling, how do you know about this? He had been in charge of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for a long time, but he had never heard of such a shocking theory. How did Guling Wuji know about it? Guling Wuji sighed with a helpless expression. In fact, ever since I left the Heavenly Fates sect, I have been secretly investigating the collapse of the heavens. I personally participated in 2 of the deductions and personally witnessed the destruction of the sacred world. Impossible. However, Qing Chi frowned. As the pavilion master of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, how come I have never heard of such an organization that specializes in researching the collapse of the heavens? Moreover, if such an organization really exists, its members should all be formation masters, right? Most of the top formation masters in the sacred world are in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Even if there are some who are not in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, I still have a good relationship with them. If these formation masters are researching the collapse of the heavens, there's no way I wouldn't know about it. Tian's eyes trembled slightly. He also felt that Qing Chi's words made sense. Brother Qing Chi, those people basically come from mysterious force. I have only come into contact with them by chance. Guling Wuji looked at Qing Chi and shook his head. He did not reveal too much information. Nie Tian saw that Guling Wuji was in a difficult position, so he didn't pursue the matter and asked, Senior Guling, even if the collapse of the heavens is true, what does it have to do with the Heavenly Fate selection? When he was discussing the location of the Heavenly Fate selection with Guling Wuji, the latter introduced the location of the sacred world of 7 cultivators in detail and then talked about the collapse of the heavens. The speed at which the sacred world of 7 cultivators is collapsing is accelerating, and the sacred world of 7 cultivators is located at the center of the sacred world of 7 cultivators. Guling Wuji frowned and said, the collapse of the heavens will continue. Due to its special location, the sacred world of 7 cultivators will be the least affected. Moreover, it will also be the last region to collapse. Senior Guling means that due to the collapse of the heavens, the 7th cultivator of true virtue's sacred world will become more and more important. As such, it may attract various forces to compete for it, right? Nie Tian immediately understood, and worry flashed in his eyes. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said, if it was the normal 7th cultivator's sacred world of 7 cultivators, it might have attracted the attention of some high-rank sacred world forces at most. But now, it's very likely that the forces of top-rank sacred worlds will intervene. Qing Chi's face stiffened, and he was momentarily stunned. Who would have thought that a small sky beacon selection would have such a huge problem? As the collapse of the heavens worsened, the 7th cultivator's sacred world would become more and more important. Naturally, it would attract the attention of various forces. If that was the case, the Fengtian sect would not just face the threat of a few organizations. Instead, it would face the pressure of the entire All Heaven Saints world. Monster no wonder, Guling Wuji rushed back to the sect because he had expected this. After calming down, Nie Tian asked tentatively, Senior Guling, not many people know about the collapse of the heavens, right? Zhu, the collapse of the heavens was too shocking. Once news of it spread, it would definitely cause chaos. Both, however, even Qi didn't know about the collapse of the heavens, so there must be very few people who knew about it. Not many. Guling Wuji nodded slightly and said, but as far as I knows, several peak forces have already found out about it. I reckon that they will act against the seventh cultivator of true cultivators. If that's the case, then I'll have to be very careful in choosing the location of the sky beacon selection. Nie Tian bitterly smiled. He was already prepared for the worst. Beacon Sovereign, I've already thought of a few locations, but Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Senior Guling, if you have anything to say, just say it. Nie Tian said after seeing Guling Wuji's reaction. Guling Wuji nodded and said, previously, I'd already brought the Beacon Emperor here to take a look. The Fengtian sect has a total of 720 peaks, among which there are 108 perilous peaks. Among these 108 perilous peaks, there are 36 forbidden peaks. Senior Guling, are you saying that the sky beacon selection will be held in the forbidden peak? Before Guling Wuji could finish, Nie Tian had already understood what he was trying to say. The 36 peaks corresponded to the 36 death acupuncture points in the human body. Institute, the so-called death acupoint, was a fatal acupoint. If it received an abnormal external force, it could be fatal. Death with such an acupoint, it was easy to imagine what the forbidden peak was like. Nie Tian guessed that the forbidden peak must be one of the forbidden areas of the Fengtian sect, and it must be extremely dangerous. Ancient Ling Wuqi's intention in choosing Forbidden Peak as the venue for the sky beacon selection was very obvious. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said, since the sacred world of 7 cultivators is a place that all the forces will fight for, we might as well take the risk and hold the sky beacon selection at the Forbidden Peak just in case. If the situation changes, we'll kill everyone in the Forbidden Peak, said Nie Tian. Heaven could feel the coldness and ruthlessness in Guling Wuji's eyes and couldn't help but tremble. This was the first time he felt such a strong killing intent from Guling Wuji. Original, come on, this seemingly amiable old man also had a vicious and ruthless side. This was normal. Since Guling Wuji was able to become the Fengtian sect master, he was naturally not a good person. Moreover, this was also for the sake of the Fengtian sect. Seeing that Nie Tian didn't speak for a long time, Guling Wuji couldn't help but ask, Sir Beacon Emperor, what do you think? At this moment, Nie Tian's weak side was revealed. He was too merciful. No one would take extreme measures unless it was absolutely necessary. Nie Tian, I agree with Guling's suggestion. At this moment, Qi also spoke up, agreeing with Guling Wuji's suggestion. Although he did not know what the Forbidden Peak meant, Guling Wuji's suggestion was undoubtedly safer. Senior Guling, Senior Qi, this matter is too big for me to decide alone. At the very least, I need to discuss it with the Beacon's Emperor. Nie Tian nodded after a moment of silence. There is no need for further discussion. I agree to hold the sky beacon selection at the Forbidden Peak. But just as he finished speaking, a cold laughter came from afar, and then a figure descended like a ghost. It was Devil's Night. Devil's Night. Nie Tian was surprised to see Devil's Night suddenly appear. Moyi had stopped by the Fengtian Fate sect for a while, but he only took a look at the sect and didn't enter. After that, Devil's Night claimed that he had gone to the Gia sect, but no one expected him to come back so soon. Why, are you surprised to see me? Devil's Night smiled faintly, then glanced at Qi and Guling Wuji. He couldn't help but smile. One is a Star Lord, the other is the Fengtian Fate sect master. It seems that both of you have a deep relationship with me. Qi and Guling Wuji stared at Devil's Night with dark expressions. Chapter 4454. Devil's Night looked at Qi and Guling Wuji. The latter two were also sizing him up. The three of them had different expressions and were deep in thought. Zheng, just as Devil's Night said, Qi and Guling Wuji were related to him. Qi was a Star Lord, while Devil's Night was derived from the starry sky, Holy Lord Nie Tian. Guling Wuchi was the sect master of the Fontian Fate sect, while Devil's Knight was the Fontian Beacon's emperor. The relationship between the two was indeed deep. Qing looked at Devil's Knight. Even though he already knew the other party's identity, he was still very shocked. Before he met Devil's Knight, Qing already knew of his existence. He even speculated that Devil's Knight's potential was even more terrifying than Hayakuten's, and that he would grow to become an existence that surpassed Hayakuten in the future. For at that time, Qing even warned Yetian that he must kill Devil's Knight. Now that he saw Devil's Knight with his own eyes, Qing understood that he had underestimated the former. The mutation of the power of the stars in Devil's Knight was greater than he expected. This also meant that Devil's Knight's talent and potential were even stronger. Guling Wuchi had a similar feeling to Qing. What shocked him was that he actually could not see through Devil's Knight's soul lattice. When he tried to sense Devil's Knight's soul lattice, he felt as though he had fallen into a boundless ocean. He could not see the edge at all. Could it be that Devil's Knight's soul lattice had already surpassed his? But Devil's Knight was so young. How could he have such a strong soul lattice? The two of you have seen enough, right? If it's possible, let's go to the various forbidden peaks to take a look. After a while, Devil's Knight said with a faint smile. Qing and Guling Wuchi finally reacted. They looked slightly embarrassed. Let's go. Tian nodded helplessly. One of the four of them were silent on the way. Tian, what do you think about Tang 13? Devil's Knight suddenly asked when they were about to reach a forbidden peak. Where's your puppet one? And Senior Wenho? You didn't bring him back? Tian deliberately avoided the question and asked in a cold tone. See, he has gone on a mission. As for Wenho, I've already negotiated with the Gia sect. Wenho has been brought back to the One Clan by the great elder of the One Clan. Devil's Knight replied with a faint smile. Wen Qingmu. Tian's eyes trembled as Wen Qingmu's face appeared in his mind. He immediately recalled that Wen Qingmu had also gone to Gia's sect previously. As the great elder of the Wen Clan, Wen Qingmu's position was unclear. Wenho had been taken away by Wen Qingmu, and no one knew if he was safe or not. Even if Wen Qingmu had really joined the Gia sect, he would not do anything to harm Wenho before they had a falling out. Fallett's Devil's Knight. I didn't expect him to really go to Gia's sect and come back alive. Tang 13 doesn't have much time left. You need to make a decision quickly. If it's too late, I won't be able to save him. Devil's Knight once again brought up Tang 13. His words were laced with a strong sense of threat. I got it. Nie Tianling said coldly and ignored Devil's Knight. This is the 100 Poison Peak. The mountain gate is filled with poison arrays. Any cultivator who enters will have their strength suppressed. Guling Wuji introduced as the four arrived at the 100 Poison Peak. No. Without waiting for the others to speak, Devil's Knight said cold. Ancient Ling Wuchi frowned and looked at Nie Tian. The latter nodded and signaled for him to continue to the next peak. In the Divine Gate Peak, there are 9 divine gates of the mysterious tomb. Once it is activated, at least 9 Sky Martial Saint ancestors must work together to break it. Guling Wuji explained as he came to the next peak, observing Devil's Knight's reaction. Not bad, but the place is a little small. Keep it as a backup. Devil's Knight glanced at the Divine Gate Peak and said calmly. Ancient Ling Wuchi's frown deepened. In his opinion, the Divine Gate Peak should be one of the best places for the Sky Beacon selection. The Divine Gate Peak was protected by a formation, and there were 9 divine gates of the mysterious tomb. If anything were to happen, at least everyone would be trapped inside. However, Devil's Knight only glanced at it briefly and said it could only be a backup. It was too reckless and arbitrary. Nieheaven glanced at Guling Wuchi and signaled for him to not be angry and continue to observe. The Azure Darkness Peak is protected by the Azure Darkness Grand Formation, and it's filled with the Azure Darkness Sword Insight. In next to no time, they arrived at another forbidden peak, and Guling Wuji had just started to accept it when he was interrupted by Mo Yi. No, Devil's Knight only said 2 words, calm and overbearing. Beacon's Emperor, you only glanced at the Green Hell Peak, and you said no. Aren't you being too arbitrary? Guling Wuchi couldn't take it anymore and asked in a cold tone, "You only need to show me a few more peaks. You don't need to express your opinion. The decision lies with me and Ye Tian." Devil's Knight glanced at Guling Wuchi indifferently and said coldly, "Do?" Guling Wuchi was so angry that his face turned green and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Guling, there's no harm in looking at a few more peaks." Qing Chi came forward and persuaded. Guling Wuchi's old face was gloomy, but he finally nodded. "Accept." Then, the four of them looked at a dozen more peaks, but they were all rejected by Devil's Knight. The Fengtian sect had a total of 36 peaks. They had seen half of them, but only the Divine Gate peak could barely be considered as an alternative. "Beacon's Emperor, what kind of peak do you want?" Guling Wuchi really couldn't take it anymore. He raised his eyebrows and asked. "First, the space inside the peak must be big enough. Second, the defense formation of the peak must be strong and not difficult to activate. Third, if an accident happens, the peak must have absolute confidence to control the situation. Fourth, which is also the most important point, if the peak is destroyed, it must not threaten the entire Heavenly Beacon's formation." Devil's Knight didn't look at Guling Wuchi and said coldly, "This." Guling Wuchi was stunned after hearing the 4 points and couldn't say a word. Although the first dozen peaks had their own advantages, none of them fulfilled the 4 conditions that Devil's Knight mentioned. Look, Devil's Knight had already prepared for the worst. He even thought of the peak being destroyed. However, compared to the entire Heavenly Beacon's formation, the peak was equivalent to a human's Achilles heel. If the Achilles heel was destroyed, the consequences would be fatal. "Guling's sect leader, bring me to see the Sixyang Peak." After a while, Devil's Knight's expression softened, and he said in a deep voice, "Sixyang Peak." Guling Wuchi's expression suddenly changed, and he was shocked when he heard those 3 words. Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw that. He couldn't help but wonder if there was something mysterious about the Sixyang Peak. "Why? Can't I?" Devil's Knight's expression darkened, and he asked cold, "Beacon's Emperor, do you know what the Sixyang Peak means to the entire Fengtian sect?" Guling Wuchi calmed down and asked in a deep voice, "I already know the Heavenly Beacon's formation like the back of my hand. Naturally, I know the importance of the Sixyang Peak. However," Emoyi laughed and said in a conceited manner, "since I mentioned the Six Suns Peak, I have my reasons. You just need to bring me to see it." Cold words were extremely domineering. Guling Wuchi looked like he was in a difficult position. He finally turned to look at Nye Tian. Chapter 4455. Seeing that Devil's Knight insisted on going to the Six Suns Peak, Guling Wuji could not help but look at Nye Tian to ask for his opinion. "What's the difference between the Six Suns Peak and an ordinary forbidden peak?" Nye Tian noticed Guling Wuji's dilemma and asked with a frown. It was obvious that Guling Wuji did not want Devil's Knight to choose the Six Suns Peak as the venue for the Sky Beacon selection. Looking at Guling Wuji's expression, it seemed that there was something special about the Six Suns Peak. "Lord Beacon Emperor, you might not know this, but the Six Suns Peak is not an ordinary forbidden peak. It's a forbidden peak of fate spirit." Guling Wuji looked troubled. As he spoke, he glanced at Devil's Knight, as if he was observing the latter's reaction. "Forbidden peak of fate spirit?" Nye Tian was confused as he did not know what that meant. The 36 forbidden peaks of the Fengtian sect are all crucial places for the survival of the sect. Among the 36 forbidden peaks, there are 3 that are forbidden within the forbidden peaks. Once they are damaged, it will directly affect the stability of the entire Sky Beacon mountain range. That's why they're called the Forbidden Peaks of Fate Spirit. Guling Wuji explained and looked at Devil's Knight again. Does the Beacon's Emperor have an ulterior motive for choosing the Six Suns Forbidden Peak as the venue for the Sky Beacon selection? Ulterior motive? Devil's Knight sneered with a look of disdain. "Do you think I'll harm the Fengtian sect, Sect Master Guling?" Guling Wuji sneered. "Why not?" Guling Wuji sneered. At that time, the Sky Beacon sect occupied the Sky Beacon mountain range. As the Beacon's Emperor, Devil's Knight must be very resentful towards it. Hence, it was normal for him to want to destroy it. Nye Tian immediately understood Guling Wuji's worries. His heart sank as he did not think of this. Devil's Knight was a vicious and temperamental person. What if he did not want to unify the Fengtian sect, but to destroy the Fengtian sect? The Beacon's emperor wanted to destroy the Fengtian sect. It might sound incomprehensible, but for Devil's Knight, nothing was impossible. Tian, don't worry. If I wanted to destroy the Fengtian sect, I wouldn't have helped you before, Devil's Knight said with a faint smile as he saw that Tian's expression wasn't right. Tian frowned and said, "Isn't it too risky to hold the Fengtian selection on the Sixyang Peak? The seventh cultivator of true virtue's sacred world would become one of the most important sacred worlds in the heavens in the future, and many great forces have been eyeing it for a long time. The Sky Beacon selection was a fuse that attracted many major powers. There is even a possibility of alerting some forces that have been hiding for a long time. Under such circumstances, the Sixyang Peak is the best choice." Devil's Knight's eyes flickered as he spoke with a cold expression. Near heavens, a light trembled. Hearing Devil's Knight's words, he seemed to know about the collapse of the heavens. "You know about it too?" Guling Wuji was surprised and asked, "Isn't it just the collapse of the heavens?" The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth curled into a sneer, and his eyes were filled with disdain. Seems the world-ending calamity in the eyes of others was nothing in his eyes. Guling Wuji was stunned and only reacted after a long time. He didn't expect that Devil's Knight also knew about the collapse of the heavens. He also didn't expect that Devil's Knight didn't care about the collapse of the heavens at all. But on second thought, the elders of the Soul Sect were mostly array masters, alchemists, and boundary masters. It wasn't strange for them to know about the collapse of the heavens. Or perhaps someone in the Soul Sect had participated in the deduction of the collapse of the heavens. "Senior Guling, let's go to the Sixyang Peak first." After thinking for a long time, Tian still decided to go to the Sixyang Peak. Guling Wuji had a helpless expression, but he still nodded and led the way. "This is Sixyang Peak." After a while, Tian and the others arrived above a mountain peak. Guling Wuji pointed down and said. Tian looked down and didn't see anything special about the Sixyang Peak. On the contrary, the mountain was much flatter than the other peaks, but the area was much larger. Tian looked carefully. Suddenly, the fat cat's voice sounded and reminded Tian. Tian's eyes couldn't help but sink. He opened his devil's eye and was instantly stunned. He saw that there was a very strange layer of clouds floating at the peak of the Sixyang Peak. It was faintly dark red, and the space seemed to be in a misty state. "Lord Beacon Emperor, the Sixyang Peak is covered by 6 layers of fire sun clouds." Guling Wuji walked to Tian's side and transmitted his voice. "The temperature of these fire sun clouds is extremely high. The surface is close to 1,000 degrees, and the center of the fire sun clouds has a temperature of more than 10 million degrees. More than 10 million degrees. Tian couldn't help but change his expression and was extremely shocked. If such a high temperature was close to the core of some stars, even an ordinary sky martial divine ancestor expert might not be able to withstand it. Tian didn't expect that this seemingly unremarkable fire sun cloud would have such a high temperature. The entire Sixyang Peak is covered by the fire yang cloud. How can we enter it? Tian took a deep breath and asked in confusion. "There are 6 underground tunnels under the Sixyang Peak. You can enter them." Guling Wuji nodded and continued. "However, 5 of these 6 passages have been blocked, and only one is passable." "One?" Tian frowned and asked. "How big is this passage?" "It's very narrow. At most, only 2 people can pass through it side by side," Guling Wuji said truthfully. Heaven's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but look at Devil's Knight. There would definitely be many people participating in the Heaven selection. Including the spectators, there would definitely be tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands. How long would it take for 10,000 people to walk through a narrow passageway that only allowed 2 people to walk side by side? "Don't worry, I have a way to temporarily expand the passageway." Devil's Knight smiled faintly, as if he had already decided on the Sixyang Peak. "Let's go in and take a look." Tian thought for a while and finally decided to enter the Six-Yang Peak to take a look. Everyone as they landed, Guling Wuji walked at the front. Soon, they arrived at the underground passageway of the Six-Yang Peak. Outside the passageway, two gray-robed elders sat quietly with their eyes closed. There was no aura around them, as if they had passed away. "Elders, I'm sorry to disturb you." Guling Wuji bowed slightly to the two elders, but the two elders did not respond at all. Guling Wuji didn't say much and directly walked in. Tian and the rest followed closely. After entering the passageway, Tian instantly felt a scorching aura rush towards him, as if he was in a furnace. This is 100 meters underground. It's tens of thousands of meters away from the fire yang cloud above. However, due to the influence of the fire yang cloud, the entire passageway is extremely hot. Guling Wuji explained as he walked forward. Heaven's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect the fire yang cloud to have such a huge influence. The Six-Yang Peak is known as the Forbidden Life Spirit Peak because of the existence of the fire yang cloud. Guling Wuji continued, "If the fire yang cloud above the Six-Yang Peak disperses, the entire Heaven Beacon mountain range will turn into a sea of fire." Tian and the rest listened quietly and didn't say anything. Peace. After a while, everyone walked to the end of the passageway. A strange crimson door appeared in front of them. It seemed to be condensed from liquid flames and was extremely strange. Chapter 4456. Everyone stared at the liquid flame door in front of them with peculiar expressions. Liquid flames were extremely rare. At first glance, the flame door in front of them looked like underground magma, but upon closer inspection, they would discover that it was formed by a kind of strange flame that flowed continuously. Nieskai noticed that the surface of the flaming door was covered in a layer of runes. Clearly, it was used to imprison flames. Namely, even so, everyone could still clearly feel the intense and scorching aura of the flaming door. This is the entrance to the Six Suns Peak. The flames in the flaming door come from the fiery sun cloud. Guling Wuji explained. Then, he walked forward and used a special hand seal to open the flaming door. Done at the same time, a blazing flame aura assaulted his face. The burning aura was extremely strong. Fortunately, none of the people present were weak. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand the burning qi. Guling Wuji was in front, and the others followed closely behind, stepping into the door of flames. After crossing the flame door, they arrived at the Real Six-Yang Peak. Unlike the other mountain gates, the Six-Yang Peak was located at the bottom of the Six-Yang Peak. It was like a huge underground palace with pavilions, terraces, and other buildings. Tian looked around and immediately discovered 6 huge stone pillars. They were extremely tall, and their tops could not be seen. They seemed to be connected to the Six-Yang Peak above. This is the 6th solar fire pillar. The top is connected to the 6th solar peak, and above it is the 6th solar sacrificial altar. Guling Wuji knew that Tian was curious, so he explained. Six-Yang altar. Devil's Knight's gaze became slightly hot, as if he was very interested in the 6th solar altar. His figure moved, and he directly climbed up one of the 6 solar flame pillars. Tian's eyes darkened as he followed Devil's Knight. Qing Qi and Guling Wuji exchanged glances with each other and immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them arrived at the top of the 6 solar fire pillar and directly ascended the 6 solar altar. Tian steadied himself and looked around. He saw 6 sun sacrificial altars arranged in a ring shape. They were connected to each other, forming a huge 6 sun ring. The 6th solar sacrificial altar was enormous. It had a circumference of 100,000 meters. It was surrounded by dragon-shaped flaming pillars. In the middle of it was a huge flaming tower. Blazing flames were constantly spurting out like flaming dragons. The surrounding temperature was hundreds of degrees Celsius. Even though Tian and the others were powerful, they were still sweating profusely. These 6 altars are perfect for the sky beacon selection. Devil's Knight smiled in satisfaction. Using the 6 yang sacrificial altar as an arena, Are you crazy? Guling Wuji's expression changed as he roared. The Yang altar was the core of the Six Suns Peak. The fire tower in the center of the altar extended upwards, directly connecting to the fiery sun cloud in the sky. If the Six Solar Altar was in danger, the entire Six Solar Peak would be implicated. If the situation got worse, and the fiery sun cloud was accidentally triggered, wouldn't the entire Fengtian sect turn into a sea of fire? Devil's Knight used the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar as an arena. Wasn't he a lunatic? This altar looks grand, but without the protection of a formation, it is not stable. Battles between warriors are often difficult to control. Sometimes the impact is too great for the altar to bear. Nietian frowned and said in a deep voice, "The Six Solar Sacrificial Altar is indeed unstable, but we have Grandmaster Qing Chi. Do we need to worry about not being able to set up a protective formation?" Devil's Knight smiled and looked at Qing Chi. Qing's expression changed as he said in surprise, "You want me to set up a protective formation for the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar? Can I?" Devil's Knight's mouth twitched as he asked. Qing's expression darkened as he looked at Nietian. "Senior Qing Chi, if you set up the protective formation, how confident are you that the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar will not be destroyed?" Nietian thought for a while and asked. "There is only half a month left until the Sky Beacon selection begins. The protective formation set up within half a month will not be too strong and cannot guarantee the stability of the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar." Qing Chi looked at the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar and said, "But as long as the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar is not attacked by experts at the peak of the Sky Martial Realm, it should be fine." Nietian slightly nodded as he calculated in his heart. Although the Sky Beacon selection was aimed at young warriors, there would definitely be experts at the peak of the Sky Martial Realm among the spectators. If he could not guarantee that these people would not attack, he would not be able to guarantee the safety of the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar. My Soul Divine sect also has many formation masters. If they cooperate with Grandmaster Qing Chi, they will definitely be able to set up a stronger protective formation. Devil's Knight did not wait for Nietian to speak. "Why must you hold the Sky Beacon selection at the Six Solar Peak?" Nietian looked at Devil's Knight and asked in a deep voice. "I have already said that the Fengtian sect will encounter unpredictable enemies. The Six Solar Peak is our best choice." Devil's Knight looked calm and sincere. "Is that really the case?" Nietian frowned as he was doubtful. He faintly felt that there must be another reason why Devil's Knight chose the Six Solar Peak as the venue for the Sky Beacon selection. "Nietian, we have the same goal. We both want the Fengtian sect to rise again. I will not do anything detrimental to the Fengtian sect." Devil's Knight knew that Nietian was doubting him. "Then we will first build a protective formation at the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar. If the protective formation of the Six Solar Sacrificial Altar is not completed by the time the Sky Beacon selection begins, or it is not strong enough to guarantee the safety of the altar, then we will change the venue to the Divine Gate Peak." Nietian thought for a while and proposed a compromise. Devil's Knight did not hesitate to agree. His eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. "Devil's Knight, when will the formation masters of the Soul Divine sect arrive?" Nietian raised his eyebrows and asked directly. "In a few days, they will bring the materials needed to build the protective formation." Devil's Knight smiled again and seemed very proud. It was obvious that he had already thought of everything and had already asked the formation masters of the Soul Divine sect to prepare the materials in advance. "Then let's go first." Nietian nodded and looked at the fiery sun clouds above again. He felt that it was somewhat unsafe. Pieces after a while, the four of them walked out of the Six Solar Peak. Along the way, they briefly discussed the matters related to the Sky Beacon selection. The Six Solar Peak was only used as the venue for the final martial arts competition. As for the early stage, it was another choice. Not the venue for the early stage was not important. All the forces would choose to wait and see in the early stage and only intervene in the later stage. Therefore, Nietian let Guling Wuqi decide the venue for the early stage. "Senior Guling, What forces are there in the seventh cultivator of true virtue? Nietian asked about the distribution of forces in the seventh cultivator of true virtue. Although the seventh cultivator of true virtue is a primary sacred world, due to its special location, the forces in the sacred world are very complicated. Moreover, their strength is not weak. Guling Wuchi took a deep breath and said, "Among the many forces, there are only 5 or 6 sects that are worth paying attention to." Guling Wuchi slightly nodded and waited for Guling Wuchi to continue. Devil's Knight had a smile on his face and seemed to be very interested. There are a total of 9 top forces in the 7th cultivator of true virtue. They are collectively known as the 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 schools. Guling Wuchi's eyes shone brightly as he began to introduce them. Chapter 44:57. After hearing Guling Wuchi's words, Nietian's eyes lit up with interest. 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 factions. Qing Wuchi and Devil's Knight were also looking forward to it. The so-called 1 religion, 2 sects, 3 families, and 4 factions refers to the 9 strongest forces in the sacred world of 7th cultivators. Guling Wuchi's eyes seemed to be deep in thought as he said, "The 1 religion, 2 sects are the Holy Sage sect, Heavenly Beacon sect, and Gia sect. The 3 families and 4 factions are the 1 family, Wind Demon's clan, Han family, Soaring Mountain sect, Equaling Mountain sect, Scarlet Lake sect, and Northern Desert's 3 Blades. Is the Holy Sage sect stronger than the Gia sect?" Nietian was puzzled. Although Guling Wuchi didn't say it clearly, he could faintly hear that there was a gap in strength between the 9 forces. The 1 religion and 2 sects seemed to be stronger than the 3 families and 4 factions. Under normal circumstances, the first faction to be talked about was usually the strongest. Thus, from what he heard, the Holy Sage sect seemed to be the strongest force in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. However, Nietian saw that the Gia sect was the strongest force and had the potential to unify the sacred world of 7th cultivators. Demon Knight also had the same question. He stared at Guling Wuchi with burning eyes and waited for him to continue. Guling Wuchi nodded slightly and said, "A long time ago, the Heavenly Beacon sect was the strongest force in the sacred world of 7th cultivators and ruled the entire sacred world. But later, the Heavenly Beacon sect declined and the Holy Sage sect rose. In a few thousand years, they subdued and annexed thousands of sects, and their forces spread over half of the sacred world of 7th cultivators. But what was strange was that when the Shang sect was at its peak, they suddenly chose to live in seclusion for some unknown reason. Many of their branches were disbanded, and the main altar of the sect retreated to Mount Mingshang. After that, their reputation deteriorated day by day. The rise of the Holy Sage sect and its seclusion was very short, only a few thousand years. The rise of the Gia sect came after the Shang sect. In the past, the Gia sect was just a small sect. Later on, an extremely powerful and ambitious sect leader appeared. Within a few years, the Gia sect had annexed several sects that were similar in strength to it, and its strength quickly accumulated. Over the next 1,000 years, the Gia sect either annexed, gathered, or allied with other sects, and rapidly grew. Until now, it has become the strongest sect in the sacred world of 7th cultivators. At this point, Guling Wuchi paused for a moment before continuing. Among the 1 religion and 2 sects, although the Shang Saints sect has been in seclusion, its foundation is still there. It has always been entrenched in Mingxing Mountain, and some of its experts have not left. Therefore, its true strength should not be below the Gia sect. The Heaven Beacon sect has declined too quickly in recent years. The upper echelons of the sect are on the verge of disbanding. Fortunately, Sect Master Lung found the Beacon Emperor, allowing the sect to be revived. Guling Wuchi looked at Devil's Knight and coughed dryly. The Heaven Beacon selection is just around the corner, and the Soul sect has appeared again. It seems that the time has come for the Fengtian sect to unify. Devil's Knight couldn't help but smile. Of course, he knew what Guling Wuchi was thinking. He said, When the Heaven Beacon Soul sect separated from the Fontian sect, it left the Heaven Beacon mountain range with many secrets. I heard that sect leader Guling has visited the Soul sect before, so you should know the strength of the Soul sect better than others. The unification of the Fontian sect was a good thing, but the problem was that after the unification, would the Fate sect or the Soul sect be in charge? There's no need to remind the Beacon's emperor. I am not only a dual cultivator, so I naturally understand the significance of the Soul sect to the Fontian sect. Guling Wuchi sneered. Although the Fontian sect has declined, its foundation is still there. It's no exaggeration to say that even today, the Heaven Beacon Mountain Range is still one of the most powerful places in the all-heaven sacred world. If the Fontian sect can make good use of the Heaven Beacon Grand Array, no one in the all-heaven sacred world will be able to take down the Heaven Beacon Mountain Range. Sect Master Guling is right. It's just that the Celestial Beacon Array is abnormally complex. Even the first Celestial Beacon Emperor, the upper echelon of the sect, and the Array Masters may not have been able to completely control the Celestial Beacon Array. Devil's Knight smiled again and said with slight ridicule, "Today, no one can activate the Heaven Beacon Grand Array. Although your Fate sect occupies the Heaven Beacon Mountain Range, you can't use the Heaven Beacon Grand Array, and you can't even activate the stone statues at the various peaks. As for the special settings of the peaks, such as the barriers, killing formations, illusion formations, and so on, you know nothing about them. Therefore, even if your Fate sect stays in the Heaven Beacon Mountain Range, you're only a gatekeeper completely unaware of what you're guarding." At the end of his speech, Emoye's face was already cold, and his eyes were gloomy. "Beacon's Emperor, what do you mean by that?" Guling Wuchi's face sank as he suppressed his anger. "Nothing. I'm just reminding your Fate sect that if you want to succeed in the Heaven Beacon selection, you must cooperate closely with your Soul sect." Devil's Knight smiled faintly, and his expression turned calm. Guling Wuchi's gaze turned gloomy. How could he not understand Devil's Knight's meaning? That the Fate sect must rely on the Soul sect to deal with the upcoming crisis. Yes, although he was angry, it was the truth. The Soul sect's members originally cultivated their soul lattices, and most of them were powerful Array Masters, so they knew many secrets of the sect. When the Soul sect left, they took these secrets with them. So, no one in the Fate sect knew how to activate the Heaven Beacon Stone statue. Senior Guling continued talking about the 3 families and 4 factions. Tian frowned and looked at Guling Wuchi. Guling Wuchi knew that there was no point in arguing, so he nodded and continued. Although the 9 powers are called the same, the 3 families and 4 factions are much weaker than the 1 church and 2 factions. The 3 families are the 1 family, the Wind Demons clan, and the Han family. The 3 families are often allied with the 1 church and 2 factions. For example, the 1 family was allied with the Heaven Beacon sect. After the Wind Demons clan was born, they became very close to the Gia sect. On the other hand, the Han family doesn't rely on other powers, so their disciples rarely join other sections. Tian nodded slightly. The 1 family and the Wind Demons clan were now allies of the Fontian sect. As for the neutral Han family, they shouldn't be a threat to the Fontian sect. What about the 4 factions? Tian glanced at Guling Wuchi and asked. The 4 factions are the Lingshan faction, the Qishan faction, the Scarlet Lake faction, and the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert. Guling Wuchi nodded slightly and said, "The 4 factions are the local powers of the sacred world of 7 cultivators. They have existed for a long time, and although they have experienced many ups and downs, they are still standing. In recent years, due to the rise of the Gia sect, the position of the 4 factions has been getting weaker and weaker. Thus, not long ago, the leaders of the 4 factions held a meeting and reached a consensus to form the 4 Factions Alliance. I heard that the leader of the 4 Factions Alliance takes turns to be the leader of the 4 factions, and each rotation lasts 1,000 years. Right now, the leader of the 4 Factions Alliance is He Dakian, the head of the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert." Tian pondered for a moment and asked, "How is the overall strength of the 4 Factions Alliance? Is it possible to rope them in?" The 4 Factions Alliance sounded pretty good. If he could rope them in, They would be a great help to the Fengtian sect. Chapter 4458. When Guling Wuji heard that Nie Tian wanted to win over the four-sect alliance, his face sank and he fell into silence. Nie Tian saw that Guling Wuji's expression was strange and couldn't help but ask, "Senior Guling, what's wrong?" Guling Wuji took a deep breath and helplessly said, "The four sects are local forces of the seventh cultivator of true cultivators. They have been in the seventh cultivator of true cultivators for a longer time than the Fengtian sect. A long time ago, when the Fengtian sect had just risen and expanded, the four sects naturally became their first target. It is said that the four sects swore to not submit to the Fengtian sect and resisted. But in the end, the higher-ups of the four sects were slaughtered by the Fengtian sect. The four sects were forced to hole up and became small local forces. Later, the Fengtian sect declined and the four sects rose again. Relying on their local advantages, they gradually became first-rate forces in the seventh cultivator of true cultivators. After that, the four sects were attacked by other forces, but they always managed to preserve their roots and survive until now. Therefore, the four sects have always been hostile to other forces and have no dealings with the major sections. With that, Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and sighed. It is basically impossible for Sir Beacon Emperor to win over the four sects alliance. So that's how it is. Nie Tian helplessly let out a sigh and shook his head with a bitter smile. He didn't expect that the history of the four sects would be so tortuous and filled with a strong sense of shame. In the organization that the four sects alliance hated the most was the Fengtian sect. After all, it was the Fengtian sect that caused the decline of the four sect for the first time. Noni Tian was very curious. How did the four sects alliance survive until now? Why was it able to revive every time and survive until now? Next, the four of them discussed for a while and decided to hold a high-level meeting 3 days later to jointly decide on the specific matters of the Sky Beacon selection. Nie Tian was about to leave when he heard Devil's Knight suddenly say, "Nie Tian, you recently broke through to the Heaven Despair realm and encountered a bottleneck, right? How did you know?" Nie Tian frowned, not concealing his surprise. Other than himself, he had only told Qing Qi and Guling Wuji about his breakthrough. How did Devil's Knight know about it? "Just like you, I've also encountered the second barrier." Devil's Knight nodded solemnly. It turned out that not long ago, Devil's Knight also tried to break through to the Heavenly Insight realm, but he encountered the same situation as Nie Tian. Although he broke through the Heavenly Insight barrier, he was blocked by the second barrier. "You also have the qualifications to be a ruler." As soon as Devil's Knight's words fell, Qing Qi's expression changed, and he couldn't help but cry out, "Ruler's aptitude?" Nie Tian and Devil's Knight's expressions changed at the same time, and they both looked at Qing Qi, not understanding what the latter meant. Of previously, Qing Qi had mentioned that he had heard about the other barrier from Hayakuten, but when Nie Tian asked, he didn't explain. Now that he suddenly said the words ruler's aptitude, how could Nie Tian not be surprised? Qing Qi's pupils shrunk, and he felt that he had said something wrong. He frowned, but he didn't explain anything. Neheaven knew that it was useless to ask again, so he pondered whether the second barrier had something to do with the Star Origin Stone. Hayakuten, Nie Tian, and Devil's Knight, the three people who had sensed the second barrier, were closely related to the Star Origin Stone. But strangely, it seemed that Dongwang Zhengrong did not have a second barrier. It was also possible that Dongwang Zhengrong also had the second barrier, but he didn't tell anyone about it. "Nie Tian, why don't you and I work together and try to break through together?" After a while, Devil's Knight spoke with a faint smile. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Mo Yi, his eyes filled with deep distrust. "To tell you the truth, I've tried many times already, but I couldn't break through the second barrier. Instead, I was injured by the barrier, and even my Yuan meridians and soul line were damaged." Devil's Knight could tell that Nie Tian didn't trust him, so he spoke honestly. Nie Tian's eyes shook. He knew that Devil's Knight was telling the truth. Dang, when he tried to break through, he encountered the same situation and even fainted for a long time. "Look, It seemed that Devil's Knight urgently needed to break through to the heavenly insight realm, or else he wouldn't have tried so many times without knowing the truth. Thinking about this, Nyation couldn't help but smile, and he had a plan in his mind. Are you thinking of using this to threaten me and force me to save Tang 13? Before Nyation could say anything, Moi seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. With a laugh, he said, joining hands to make breakthroughs is beneficial to both of us. If you use this as a threat, you will lose the equality between us. Yes, but what if I don't agree? Nyation's lips twitched, and he faintly smiled. Alliance working together to break through was beneficial to both parties, but Nyation's advantage was that he wasn't in a hurry. Demona, as if expecting Nyation to say this, Devil's Knight's lips twitched. I can give Tang 13 a chance and help him suppress the soul seed in his body. Whether or not he can defeat the soul seed will depend on his own luck. What do you mean? Nyation's eyes heated, interested. I've seen it. Though the soul seed is strong, it is not complete, so it can only exist for a limited amount of time. When the time is up, the soul seed will disappear. Devil's Knight's eyes darkened. Based on my observation, the soul seed can only exist for half a month to 1 month. I will use my own soul force to help Tang 13 suppress the soul seed. As long as Tang 13 can hold on for a month, the soul seed will disappear and he will be saved. As for how long Tang 13 can hold on, it will depend on the growth of the soul seed, as well as his own soul and willpower. I cannot guarantee that Tang 13 will be saved, but to him, this is a chance. Nyation understood Devil's Knight's meaning and fell into deep thought. Yes, just like Devil's Knight said, the soul of Huang Quan inside Tang 13 is only one of the 3 souls of Huang Quan. It is not complete and cannot exist for a long time. Such as if this soul of Huang Quan cannot take over Tang 13, there are still 2 other souls of Huang Quan. If Mori Shire took over another vessel of Huang Quan, the 3 souls of Huang Quan will automatically return and Tang 13 will be saved. Of the Ice Phoenix, Ji Shui said the curse of 3 lives can suppress the soul of Huang Quan for a month. But regretfully, the curse of 3 lives couldn't even suppress the soul of Huang Quan for half a month. This maybe it was because Mori Shire saw Tang 13 as his main target to take over. But if Tang 13 can hold on for too long, Mori Shire will not take the risk and will take over the other 2 vessels of Huang Quan. Okay, deal. Understanding this, Nyation nodded heavily and agreed to Devil's Knight's suggestion. Demon with Knight's soul force suppression and the help of the soul lattice from the heaven beaconing statue, Tang 13 should be able to hold on for a month. Take me to Tang 13. Devil's Knight did not waste any time and said directly. Nyation nodded and signaled Guling Wuji to lead the way. But at this moment, Nyation and the others' expressions changed and they looked up into the sky. Whoosh! High up in the sky, accompanied by the deep hum of a saber, a 10,000-meter-long shadow of a saber appeared. With the power to destroy heaven and earth, it slashed down towards one of the peaks of the heaven-beaconing mountain range. Chapter 4459. High up in the sky above Fengtian mountain range. One slash was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! The majestic aura shook heaven and earth. Astral winds howled and thunder howled. The eyes of Nyation and the others trembled violently. They could feel the terrifying power of this slash. It seemed to have the power to destroy the world. The power of such a slash far exceeded that of a peak sky martial divine ancestor. If it were to fall, Fengtian mountain range would probably be cut in half. Nyation's heart sank. He then looked at Guling Wuji. The latter had already moved. He soared into the sky and released his aura. He raised his palm and blocked the world-destroying slash. A few at the same time, many figures soared into the sky from the other peaks of Fengtian mountain range. They were like dragons breaking out of the abyss, resisting the slash in the sky. Nyation's eyes trembled. He did not expect the people of Fengtian Fate Sect to react so quickly. They were able to resist in an instant. Devil's Knight looked at everything in front of him. He was not nervous at all. Instead, He looked relaxed as if he was watching a good show. Boom! At that moment, the shadow of the saber descended, unleashing a destructive might that forcefully crushed the resistance from below. Then, with an unstoppable force, the saber came crashing down. Nietion's expression changed greatly. He could not help but exclaim in his heart. The power of this slash was too shocking. Like the person who attacked had already made up his mind to destroy the Fengtian Fate sect. Yet he had seen many powerful swordsmen, but it was his first time seeing such a terrifying one. Judging from this slash alone, the strength of the person who had unleashed the blade was probably not much weaker than the young God-Sword Emperor. However, this was only the sacred world of 7th cultivators. How could there be such a terrifying swordsman here? Could it be that the person who attacked was not a cultivator from the sacred world of 7th cultivators, but from another force? Could it be the human emperor's palace? Nietion's expression changed again when he thought of the human emperor's palace. Judging from the power of the slash, the person who attacked was definitely stronger than the 5 deans. Ordinary forces definitely did not have such an expert. Therefore, the person who attacked was most likely an elder of the human emperor's palace. Bang! At this moment, Guling Wuji's figure was pushed back by the impact of the saber aura. He fell straight down and smashed into the ground like a giant boulder, kicking up a cloud of dust. Guling, are you all right? Qing Chi's figure flashed and supported Guling Wuji as he asked anxiously. I'm fine. Guling Wuji steadied himself and stared at the overwhelming blade shadows with a grave expression. Was the Fengtian sect going to be annihilated today? Like Guling Wuji, the other dozens of figures were also crushed by the saber aura and fell to the ground. Rumble! The saber shadow fell with a loud rumble. Everywhere it passed, the steep mountain peaks were directly destroyed. The trees and rocks were instantly crushed. Even the earth veins were impacted. The earth rumbled endlessly. At this time, Devil's Knight's expression also changed, revealing a nervous expression. Rumble bang bang bang. In the sky, there were continuous explosions. Under the gaze of countless people, the saber shadow directly chopped off a strange mountain that was more than 100,000 meters tall. The mountain rocks fell and caused a wave of dust that was dozens of meters high on the ground. That's the Nine Links Peak. Guling Wuji's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. Clench. Then, more than a dozen mountains were destroyed, and the surrounding area was chaotic. Below the saber shadow, where the powerful saber aura landed, a crack that was a few hundred meters wide appeared in the mountain range, and it was continuously expanding. The saber seemed to be forcefully tearing the earth apart. Everyone retreat. Seeing this, Guling Wuji's expression changed drastically. He screamed and retreated rapidly. Judging from the trajectory of the saber aura, if the saber were to descend a few hundred meters further, it would definitely severely damage the earth veins under Sky Beacon Mountain Range. By then, it would not only be a few peaks that were destroyed, but the entire Sky Beacon Mountain Range would collapse and even sink into the cracks in the ground. Nietion frowned and looked up. The disciples of the surrounding peaks had begun to flee, and he could clearly see the bloody corpses on the ground. Foam! The heavenly selection had yet to begin, but the Sky Beacon sect had already suffered such a calamity. How could Nietion not be heartbroken? Sky Shrouding Totem, activate! In his anger, Nietion stomped the ground and unleashed the astral force in his body, forming a Sky Shrouding Totem that shrouded the saber shadow. Nietion, Master Beacon Emperor. Qing Chi and Guling Wuji's eyes widened as they yelled at the same time. Nietion was out of his mind. With his strength, how could he resist the attack? A cold smile appeared at the corner of Mo Ye's mouth as he stared at Nietion. Bang! At that instant, the saber shadow suddenly sank, causing the heavens and earth to let out a cry. Following this, Nietion's Sky Shrouding Totem crumbled into pieces. Not even a few dozen Sky Martial Sacred Ancestors were able to weaken the saber shadow. How could Nietion resist it with his strength? Bang! 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 However, right at this moment, A wave of explosions suddenly resounded from the ground, and then numerous enormous figures shot into the sky. They emanated numerous dazzling and resplendent talisman markings, and then they linked together to form a net of talisman markings. Guling Wuji and the others were stunned by the scene before them. When they took a closer look, they realized that the figures were the Sky Beacon's stone statues. The Sky Beacon's stone statues activated themselves? Guling Wuji was dumbfounded. He had no idea what was going on. Devil's Knight smirked. He was not too surprised, as if everything was within his expectations. Tian saw the Sky Beacon's stone statues activate and immediately retreated. Buzz. In the sky, the saber shadow let out a loud hum, but its power was blocked by the net of talismans and could not sink any further. Titan. In the next second, a shocking scene took place. Fu! The net of talismans suddenly tightened, causing cracks to appear on the saber shadow, as if it was about to shatter. Such power! Guling Wuji was shocked. He did not expect a few dozen Sky Beacon's stone statues to possess such power. The Fengtian sect had 720 gates, and each gate had hundreds of stone statues. If all of these stone statues were activated, the power would be unimaginable. Boom! At that moment, the net of talismans tightened again. Then, there was an explosion in the sky, and the enormous saber shadow collapsed, turning into waves of saber intent that spread in all directions. The crowd, everyone was dumbfounded, unable to react for a long time. Sway! The net of talismans dispersed and turned into talismans that were absorbed by the Sky Beacon stone statues. Boom! Then, the Sky Beacon stone statues fell back to their original positions, as if they had never moved. Half! After a few days, the waves in the sky slowly dissipated, and 3 figures in black appeared before everyone's eyes. 3. This figure was extremely burly, surrounded by saber intent. His domineering posture shocked the heavens and earth. Tian frowned. He did not expect 3 people to appear. Could it be that the saber shadow was created by the 3 of them? Northern Desert, 3 sabers. Guling Wuji looked at the 3 black-clothed saber-wielders with a serious look and called out their names word by word. Chapter 4460. The 3 black-clothed saber-men in the air were none other than the 3 heads of the Northern Desert 3 Sabers, one of the 4 major sections. North, the 3 Blades of the Desert was not only the name of a sect, but also the collective name of the sect's 3 top bladesmen. North, the 3 Blades of the Desert was a force formed entirely by saber users. The leaders of the sect were 3 top-notch saber users, and the people in the sect called them the Saber Heads. The 3 saber users in the sky above Fengtian mountain range were the 3 saber leaders of the Northern Desert 3 Sabers. Ancient Ling Wuqi's eyes darkened. He did not expect the 3 Blades of the Northern Desert to suddenly attack the Fengtian Fate sect. Although the sect and the Fengtian sect had a deep grudge against each other, that was a long time ago. There was no need for them to seek revenge now. The 4 sects had formed an alliance not long ago, but it was only to protect themselves, so they did not do anything out of line. One could understand why 3 Blades MO would suddenly attack Fengtian Fate sect. Heaven looked at the 3 saber leaders with a gloomy gaze, deep in thought. The 3 saber leaders had sharp saber intents and vigorous saber moves. As they stood in the air, they were like 3 mountains. Clearly, they were all extremely strong saber users. But, however, the 3 of them had not reached the level of a peak bladesman. Tian was very puzzled. With the strength of the 3 of them, it was impossible for them to burst out with such a terrifying saber attack. Even if the 3 of them joined forces, they shouldn't be so powerful. Is there anyone else in the Fengtian Fate sect who can still breathe? At this time, one of them spoke with a thunderous voice. Tian's eyes darkened. The person who spoke had the weakest aura among the 3. He should be the one with the lowest status. So you're the 3 heads of the 3 sabers of the Northern Desert. I am the sect leader of the Fengtian Ming sect, Guling Wuji. Without waiting for Tian to speak, Guling Wuji's figure had already soared into the sky. His deep voice resounded through the heavens and earth. Although he was being polite, his tone was clearly filled with anger and restraint. The Feng Tian Fate sect has one emperor and two sections. As the sect master, you can't take charge. Let your beacon emperor come out and speak. Dougal Lai coldly glanced at Guling Wuji and said with disdain, He was the leader of the three blades of the northern desert. He was the weakest among the three, but he had the worst temper. Impudent. Guling Wuji's eyes darkened and he was enraged. He let out a roar and his aura was unleashed like a giant wave, crushing toward Dougal Lai. Dougal Lai's lips curled into a cold smile. He took a step forward and his saber intent surged out, shattering the pressure of the aura in front of him. He then sneered, A mere patriarch wants to suppress others with his aura? What a joke. Guling Wuji's face darkened. He wanted to speak again, but he sensed a familiar aura behind him, causing him to involuntarily take half a step back. Guling, a silhouette descended from the sky. It was none other than the other leader of the Feng Tianming sect, Lung Shuangwuchen. A few at the same time, the other higher-ups of the Feng Tian Fate sect appeared, including Fan Zhong, Shun Yunhe, and several other protectors. Ancient Ling Wuchi retreated behind Lung Shuangwuchen and stopped talking. In recent years, Lung Shuangwuchen had been in charge of the Feng Tian Fate sect, so it was only right for him to speak. Moreover, Guling Wuji was good at array formations and enchantments, and was not good at fighting. Is this the power of the Feng Tian Fate sect? Dougal Lai's gaze swept across Lung Shuang, Wuchen, and the others as he sneered. You guys have really declined. Brother my Feng Tianming sect has always been at peace with your four sects alliance. Why are you invading my sect today? Lung Shuangwuchen ignored Dougal Lai and fixed his eyes on He Dakian, the great saber chief of the Desert North. He was still in closed-door cultivation just now, but he came out early when he was alarmed by the changes in the sect. He didn't expect the three blades of the northern desert who had come to attack the Feng Tian Fate sect. The three blades of the northern desert and the other three sects all had a deep grudge against the Feng Tian sect from long ago. However, this was all in the distant past. In the recent tens of thousands of years, the school and the four sects had a pretty good relationship. At the very least, they weren't enemies. Occasionally, the four schools would send disciples to the Feng Tianming sect to cultivate. Shuang Wuchen had traveled around the sacred world of seven cultivators in his early years, and had come into contact with the people of the four sects, especially the people of the northern desert three blades. He had even cooperated with the leader of the Great Blade, He Dakian, and could be considered as a friend. Institute, therefore, Lung Shuangwuchen stepped forward and questioned He Dakian directly. You? Dougal Lai was about to get angry after being ignored, but He Dakian raised his hand to stop him. Sect Master Lung, I should be the one asking you this, right? He Dakian took a step forward, the saber intent around him raging, causing the surrounding void to tremble. His gaze was cold and murderous, as if he was suppressing his raging rage. Brother what do you mean? Lung Shuangwuchen frowned and asked in surprise. Now that things have come to this, are you still going to play dumb? He Dakian sneered as the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He said in a deep voice, Your Feng Tian Fate sect is still a great sect. Why are you doing such despicable things? Lung Shuangwuchen's eyes darkened. He immediately felt that things were not as simple as they seemed. He said in a deep voice, Blade Chief although you and I are not considered close friends, we are still somewhat fickle. I don't understand what you're saying. Please explain yourself. Is this clear enough? He Dakian frowned and waved his hand. A bunch of tokens flew out at an incredible speed towards Lung Shuangwuchen with extreme sharpness. Lung Shuangwuchen was not afraid at all. He grabbed the token in the air and exclaimed, The Feng Wood Token. The Feng Wood Token was unique to the Feng Tian Fate sect. It was made of special wood and special runes. It was used by the sect leader to issue orders to his subordinates. Feng. Once the Feng Wood Token was issued, the disciples would carry out their tasks. Once the tasks were completed, they would have to return the token to the sect. Therefore, outsiders could not have the phone with token. Strange. The strange thing was, why did Hidekian have the phone with token? This is the Fontion Fate Sex token. Why is it in your hands? Lung Shuang Wuchen calmed down and asked in a deep voice. That's what I want to ask you. Hidekian let out a thunderous roar. The saber intent around him seemed like it was about to boil. He said furiously, my four-sect alliance does not want to fight with anyone for power. Even if we form an alliance, it is only to protect ourselves. But your Fontion Fate sect is so aggressive. You even sent your disciples to kill the people of the four-sects alliance. They are like animals, killing the innocent, not even sparing the women and children. The four-sect alliance has 17 cities and tens of millions of civilians. They have been massacred by them. Outside the city gates, blood flows like a river and corpses are piled up like a mountain. The stench of blood is everywhere. Lung Shuang Wuchen, tell me, should I avenge them? Boom! In his rage, the saber intent around Hidekian's body surged like the sea, causing heaven and earth to tremble. Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression changed. He immediately reacted and asked in shock, you found these phone with tokens from the people who killed them? What do you think? Hidekian's eyes were bloodshot. He took a step forward and his saber intent soared to the sky, as if it wanted to split the world in half. Chapter 4461. Hidekian's saber intent surged like waves, causing the space around him to groan. At that moment, he was like a raging butcher's knife that wanted to kill everyone in front of him. 17 towns and tens of millions of lives were the reason for Hidekian's rage. Blade Master, we haven't found out the truth yet. Please calm down. Lung Shuang Wuchen's eyes darkened, and he took a few steps back. He was not afraid of Hidekian, but he did not want to fight him. There was something fishy about this. It was highly likely that someone had planted the blame. In fact, Hidekian and the other two had attacked the Fontion Fate sect without knowing the truth. They had destroyed more than a dozen peaks and even killed many Fate sect disciples. This had enraged Lung Shuang Wuchen. However, he knew that he had to calm down no matter how angry he was. If he really fought with Hidekian, it would undoubtedly turn into a war between the Fontion Fate sect and the Four-Sect Alliance. Calm down my ass. However, at that moment, before Hidekian could speak, Dugalai roared. The saber intent around him floated in the air, and the broadsword in his hand slashed down. A domineering saber shadow appeared in an instant and pressed down on Lung Shuang Wuchen with a momentum that could split mountains. Lung Shuang Wuchen's eyes trembled slightly. He gently stomped his feet, and a halo shield appeared around his body, blocking Dugalai's tyrannical attack. However, he was forced to retreat a few meters. Go to hell. Then, before Lung Shuang Wuchen could stabilize himself, Dugalai attacked again. The saber aura surged into the sky like a falling galaxy. Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression changed when he sensed that this attack was not a simple one. He then moved his palm, and a strange lotus appeared. He threw it into the air, and it bloomed in the air, releasing layers of colorful splendor. It was like a spring breeze that dispersed the endless saber intent. Dugalai's eyes froze, and he was shocked. He had not expected Lung Shuang Wuchen to have such an amazing technique. However, in the next moment, before Dugalai could react, the strange lotus suddenly fell and turned into rune shackles that imprisoned him. Damn it! Dugalai roared and tried to break free, but he found that the rune shackles were getting tighter and tighter. They directly penetrated his flesh and absorbed his blood yuan force. Blade Master, please calm down. Lung Shuang Wuchen shouted before Hidekian could make a move. Hidekian originally wanted to make a move, but he hesitated for a moment and ultimately still endured it. Beside him, the second Blade Chief of the Northern Desert, Ganxing, also stopped in time. Blade Master, I only want third Blade Master to calm down. I won't hurt him. When Lung Shuang Wuchen saw that Hidekian did not make a move, he allowed a long breath and waved his hand to release Dugalai. If Hidekian and Ganxing had made a move, then Guling Wuchi and the others behind Lung Shuang Wuchen would definitely have made a move too. At that time, it would be difficult for both sides to stop. Old fart, I'll chop you up. Dugalai flew into a rage after breaking free. He roared and wanted to attack again, but Hidakian stopped him. Third brother, don't be rash. Hidakian stopped Dugalai and stared at Lung Shuangwuchen. He said loudly, Sect Leader Lung, the other higher-ups of the Four-Sect Alliance are also on their way to the Fengtian Fate Sect. Therefore, you must give me an explanation for the massacre by the disciples of the Fengtian Fate Sect. Hidakian was much calmer now, but he could not hide the murderous intent in his eyes. He did not expect Lung Shuangwuchen to be so powerful that he could suppress Dugalai with one hand. Dugalai, although he was the weakest among the three blades of the northern desert, he was not an ordinary person. It seemed that although the Fengtian Fate Sect had declined for a long time, its overall strength could not be underestimated. Dugalai was not weak. It was just that the three blades of the northern desert had used up too much of his strength. Moreover, he did not know Lung Shuangwuchen at all, so he was caught off guard and was directly controlled by the latter. If they fought face to face, even if Lung Shuangwuchen could win, he would have to pay the price. Blade Master the massacre is not a small matter. Aren't you being too presumptuous to conclude that it was done by the Fengtian Fate Sect with just a few tokens? How could Lung Shuangwuchen not know that Hidakian was threatening him by mentioning the Four-Sect Alliance? But at the same time, it also meant that he would not attack anymore. If it was just a few tokens, I would not have been so impulsive. Hidakian sneered and said, I personally took the Fengtian with tokens from the murderers. I also checked their martial bodies and found that they were all martial artists with lifelines. Moreover, the leader admitted that he was ordered by the Fengtian Fate Sect's Tianyue flagmaster, Fan Zhong, to massacre the city. Fan Zhong. When Lung Shuangwuchen heard this name, his expression changed, and his heart sank. Fan Zhong was one of the four flagmasters of the Fengtian Fate Sect, but he had always coveted the position of sect leader. During this time, Lung Shuangwuchen had been in seclusion, so the sect's affairs were handled by the two flagmasters, Fan Zhong and Shen Yunhe. Could it be that Fan Zhong acted on his own and sent people to massacre the cities ruled by the Four-Sect Alliance? Such as if that was the case, even if Lung Shuangwuchen didn't know about it, it was indeed the Fengtian Fate Sect's doing. Sect Master Lung, why don't you let Fan Zhong explain the situation in person? Hidakian had a rough appearance, but his mind was very meticulous. He had already guessed some secrets from Lung Shuang and Wuchen's reaction. The expressions of Nyetian and the others changed as well. Everyone from the Fengtian Fate Sect turned to look at Fan Zhong. Cold while Shuangwuchen was in seclusion, the Fengtian Fate Sect had undergone a huge change. However, heaven knew that Fan Zhong had plotted with the Gia sect and made some shady deals. Ghost the Cliff sect had always had the ambition to unify the seven cultivators' sacred world. Not only did they want to deal with the Fengtian Fate sect, but they also wanted to deal with the other sects, including the Four-Sect Alliance. Under such circumstances, it wasn't impossible for Gia sect to get Fan Zhong to send people to provoke the Four-Sect Alliance or even massacre a city. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Fan Zhong's old face immediately changed, turning green and red. Clearly, he had a guilty conscience. This is bad. Nyetian's heart sank when he saw Fan Zhong's reaction. Oh no, could it be that Fan Zhong had really sent those people to massacre the city? At this time, Lung Shuangwuchen roared and asked Fan Zhong to come out. Sectmaster. Fan Zhong trembled as he stood up. His eyes flickered with uncertainty and his head was lowered. Lung Shuangwuchen felt even more uneasy when he saw this scene. His expression turned ugly as he scolded. Speak. What exactly happened? From the looks of it, it was most likely Fan Zhong's doing. However, Lung Shuangwuchen couldn't understand. Even if Fan Zhong coveted the position of sect master, why did he have to massacre the people of the Four-Sect Alliance? For the Fengtian Fate Sect, making enemies everywhere. What benefits did it bring to him? Fan Zhong slightly raised his head. His gaze swept across Hidakian and the others as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Flagmaster Fan, you are an expert of your generation. Do you not dare to admit what you did? Hidekian's eyes were dark as he spoke in a cold tone. He was like a man-eating beast. Chapter 4462. Hidekian glared at Fan Zhong with a murderous look in his eyes. It was obvious that he was ready to attack at any time. Fan Zhong's expression was extremely ugly. He kept looking at Gu Ling Wuji, but the latter's face was gloomy and he ignored him. Flag Leader Fan, are you still not going to say anything? Hidekian could no longer suppress the murderous intent in his heart when he saw that Fan Zhong did not say anything. Fan Zhong, what exactly happened? Tell me everything. Guling Wuji was also angry and he shouted in a cold tone. Fan Zhong was drenched in cold sweat and his face was as pale as a sheet. He finally said, "This matter is indeed related to me. You really did it." Hidekian's eyes narrowed and the saber intent around him burst out like a volcano eruption. If he did not still have a trace of rationality, he would have killed Fan Zhong already. Guling Wuji's tensed face immediately collapsed when he heard Fan Zhong's words. The stone in his heart fell to the bottom. Although he could tell that this matter was related to Fan Zhong, he still had a sliver of hope in his heart. However, Fan Zhong's words shattered the last bit of hope in his heart. It seemed like this matter would not be resolved easily. Nie Tian stood at the side with an ugly expression. Back then, he chose to ignore Fan Zhong's previous actions for the sake of the Fengtian Fate sect. He did not expect Fan Zhong to do something so heartless. Following that, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Fan Zhong finally revealed the ins and outs of the matter. It turned out that when Fan Zhong was working with the Gia sect, he was secretly instructed by the Gia sect master to secretly train a group of assassins. These assassins came from a Gia sect, but they cultivated in the Fengtian Fate sect. They cultivated their fate, and at the same time, they practiced the Fengtian Fate sect's martial techniques. On the surface, they were disciples of the Fengtian Fate sect, but in reality, they were assassins from the Gia sect. About a few months ago, these assassins were recalled to the Gia sect, and there was no news of them after that. The massacre that happened in the four-sect alliance should be done by these assassins. Fan Zhong was much calmer at the end and sighed. These assassins aren't disciples of the Heaven's Beacon sect. They were personally trained by me. Therefore, none of this has anything to do with the Fengtian Fate sect. It was all my doing. I am willing to bear any consequences. After saying that, Fan Zhong seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. His eyes no longer had the sharpness from before. Fan Zhong had initially thought that he would be able to conceal the fact that he had betrayed the sect, and that only Nie Tian and the others would know about it. Who would have thought that he would have no choice but to confess his betrayal in front of everyone? This time, his reputation was completely ruined. As the last sentence fell, the scene fell into a dead silence. Guling Wuji's expression softened a little. Things were not as serious as he had thought. He didn't expect Fan Zhong to betray the Fengtian Fate sect and collude with external enemies just for the position of sect master. What was even more unexpected was that Nie Tian had actually settled this matter. If Nie Tian didn't appear, the Fengtian Fate sect would have changed by the time Guling Wuji finished his seclusion. The others from the Fengtian Fate sect also calmed down a little. Fan Zhong had admitted everything and was willing to bear the consequences. This was obviously a good thing for the Fengtian Fate sect. But the problem was, would Hidekian accept Fan Zhong's explanation? Even if what he said was true? What a great excuse. After a while, Hidekian opened his mouth. The murderous intent in his eyes didn't decrease at all. Instead, it became even more intense. He said in a deep voice, "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Even a ghost wouldn't believe such an excuse." Blade Master everything I said is true. Fan Zhong's expression changed as if he didn't expect Hidekian to have such a reaction. He had already admitted that he had betrayed the sect, so why would he lie? One had to admit that Fan Zhong was too focused on his own matters that he neglected the thoughts of Hidekian and the others. Guling Wuji frowned, but he wasn't too surprised. Putting himself in Hidekian's shoes, it wasn't strange for him to think that Fan Zhong was lying. First of all, the Fengtian Fate sect and the Gia sect were mortal enemies. This was something that everyone in the sacred world of 7th cultivators knew. Fan Zhong pushing the blame to the Gia sect was already suspicious. Secondly, Hidekian had the phone with token, the lifeline cultivator, and the words of the assassin before his death. These were all ironclad evidence, so the Feng Tian Fate sect couldn't escape responsibility. Fan Zhong standing out to take on everything by himself. Wasn't this the same as abandoning the rook to protect the general? Lastly, Fan Zhong was the flag master of the Feng Tian Fate sect, second only to the sect master. Why would he collude with the Gia sect? Was it really just for the sect master's position? At least in Hidekian's opinion, a mere sect master's position wasn't enough for a flag master to betray the sect. With these considerations, it was impossible for Hidekian to believe Fan Zhong's words. Guling Wuqi, Fan Zhong, you're a sect master and a flag master. What a good show. At this time, Dugalai couldn't hold it in anymore and shouted, "You've massacred tens of millions of civilians from our 4 sections. Do you think it'll end just by letting a flag master take the blame?" Hidekian was also anxious and directly swore. 3 blade leaders. This he dares to swear on the dignity of martial arts that if there's even the slightest bit of falsehood in what I just said, I will suffer the wrath of the heavens. Swear? Dugalai sneered and said disdainfully, "You're someone who casually betrays the sect. What qualifications do you have to talk about the dignity of martial arts?" You. Fan Zhong's expression sank. He suddenly felt his qi and blood surge, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The wrath of the heavens has arrived so quickly. It seems that even the heavens can't stand it anymore. Dugalai sneered, and his expression became even more arrogant and disdainful. Guling Wuqi glanced at Fan Zhong and didn't know what to say. "Fan Zhong, you can leave first." At this time, a calm voice was heard and a young figure walked forward. It was Nie Tian. Fan Zhong's face was pale. He looked deeply at Nie Tian and retreated to the side. "Where did this brat come from? Do you think you have a right to speak here?" Dugalai's face darkened when he saw a young martial artist suddenly walking over. He roared angrily, and his aura surged like a raging wave. Nie Tianling stood where he was and didn't move an inch. "Huh?" Dugalai's expression changed, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect that this martial artist in the 9th level of the Heaven Tribulation realm would be unafraid of his aura. "Dugalai, this is the Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian sect. Don't be rude." Seeing this, Guling Wuqi took a step forward and a sharp aura whistled out. It directly broke through Dugalai's aura and forced the latter to take a few steps back. "He's the Beacon Emperor?" Dugalai steadied himself and looked at Nie Tian in shock. He clearly didn't expect the Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian sect to be such a young martial artist. The Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian sect looks at Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly and glanced at Dugalai before locking his gaze on Hidekian. Chapter 4463. Hidekian sized up Nie Tian, and his expression changed slightly. He did not expect the Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian sect to be such a young cultivator. Dang! Before coming to the Feng Tian sect, Hidekian had heard some rumors about the Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian sect. Most of them were about how the Beacon Emperor defeated the challengers from the Gia sect. Ghost. Hidekian had never seen the geniuses of the Cliff sect before, but he could roughly guess that they were all talented young cultivators. They should be at least in the heavenly enlightenment realm. Difficult. Could it be that those geniuses were defeated by this young, silver-haired swordsman? "Sir Beacon King, since you are the master of a sect, you should give me an explanation." After a moment, Hidekian spoke with an expressionless face. Although he was threatening, but everyone could feel that Hidekian was not as aggressive as before when facing Nie Tian. He seemed to be much calmer. "Then may I ask, what explanation do you want?" Nie Tian's lips twitched as he smiled evilly. "Your Feng Tian sect massacred 17 cities of the 4-sect alliance and tens of millions of lives. What kind of explanation do you think I want?" Hidekian's face darkened. He did not expect Nie Tian to have such an attitude. Guling Wuqi, Lung Shuang Wuchen, and the rest's expressions changed. They felt that Nie Tian's attitude was inappropriate. Even though the massacre of the 4-sect alliance was not done by the Feng Tian sect, It had a lot to do with the Fengtian sect. Hidakian and the rest were here to denounce him, but Nietian was acting like a rascal. Wasn't this adding fuel to the fire? Blade Leader I am very sad that your sect was massacred. But Flag Leader Fan has already explained that everything was done by him and the Gia sect. Nietian was very calm. Indeed, even so, the Fengtian Fate School still has to bear a lot of responsibility for this. But the three of you ambushed our sect before figuring out what happened. Not only did you destroy a dozen of our peaks, but you also killed many of our disciples. I feel that the sect has already paid a heavy price for this. If you still want an explanation, you should go to the Gia sect, not the Fengtian Fate sect. Hidakian's eyes darkened, and his face turned red with anger. He couldn't say a word. He never imagined that Nietian would say such a thing. Gu Ling Wuqi, Lung Shuang Wuchen, and the rest were stunned as well. Nietian was being domineering and shameless. Big brother, why are you still talking nonsense with them? Let's directly start the battle. Dugalai, who was by the side, had long been unable to restrain himself and directly roared. Since Nietian was so unreasonable, there was no need to talk anymore. Because in fact, in the eyes of others, Nietian was indeed being unreasonable. But if they thought about it carefully, Nietian's words were not unreasonable. Because the Fengtian Fate sect was indeed responsible for this matter, but they shouldn't bear the main responsibility. The main responsibility lay with the Gia sect and Fanzhong. Buta, as far as Nietian was concerned, Hidakian's reckless decision to attack the heaven-conducting sect when he didn't know the truth was very infuriating. Fengtian the Heaven selection was just around the corner, but someone destroyed more than a dozen peaks of the Fengtian Fate sect. This was a heavy blow to the Fengtian Fate sect's prestige and might even affect the upcoming Heaven selection. Because of this, Nietian was a little angry. If it wasn't for the fact that the four sects' alliance's cities were massacred, Nietian would have declared war against them. The reason why Hidakian's group dared to be so arrogant was not because they were sad, but also because they looked down on the Fengtian Fate sect. In other words, if Hidakian had evidence that the Gia sect had massacred the cities, would he still bring Ganxing and Dugalai along to denounce them? To put it bluntly, Hidakian was still bullying the Fengtian Fate sect because they were weak. But Hidakian's group did not expect the Fengtian Fate sect to have such a strong foundation to be able to block their combined attack. But the previous attack was so powerful that it was clearly not meant to destroy the Fengtian Fate sect's peaks, but the entire Fengtian mountain range. Everyone else's attention was focused on the massacre, but Nietian was calmer, so he thought more about it. Because of this, therefore, the fact that Nietian was talking to Hidakian in such a calm manner was already very benevolent of him. Sir Beacon Emperor, how can you prove that Fanzhong isn't lying? At this moment, the second blade leader of the Northern Desert, Three Blades, Ganxing, stepped forward and stopped the impulsive Dugalai. He looked at Nietian and asked. Nietian frowned and pondered for a moment. In the end, he told them about Fanzhong and the conditions that the Ghost Cliff sect had set for Fanzhong. That's what happened. I have told you the truth. Whether you believe me or not is up to you. With that, Nietian looked at Hidakian again. He knew that the latter was the one who had the final say. Hidakian's face darkened as he stared at Nietian. After a long while, he finally spoke. Sir Beacon Emperor, I can believe you for now. Blade Leader, he is indeed a wise man. You know when to advance and when to retreat. Nietian smiled faintly and sighed in relief. In fact, he was also worried that Hidakian would force the situation to an extreme. That would be terrible. Lung Shuang, Wuchen, and the others' expressions changed. They didn't expect Hidakian to show weakness. I will definitely investigate the massacre. If the truth is not what Fanzhong said, the four-sect alliance will make the Fengtian Fate sect pay the price, even if it means the survival of our sect. Hidakian's expression darkened, and he spoke in a cold tone. Actually, at this moment, Hidakian had already calmed down and had his own judgment of the entire matter. Although, however, all the evidence pointed to the Fengtian Fate sect. That was exactly why it was so strange. Think about it. If the Fengtian Fate sect was the mastermind, why would they expose so much evidence and let the killers carry the Fengwood badge? Wasn't this telling others that the Fengtian Fate sect was the one who massacred the city? Moreover, the Fengtian Fate sect had no reason to massacre the city. The grudge between the Fengtian Fate sect and the Four-Sect Alliance was something that happened a long time ago. Ever since the Fengtian Fate sect declined, both sides had minded their own business. It was even more unreasonable for the Fengtian Fate sect to massacre the city just as the selection was about to begin. Fengtian Fate sect, the Fengtian Fate sect hoped for peace and stability more than anyone else. So why would they provoke the Four-Sect Alliance that posed no threat to them? After thinking about it, Hidekian felt that the mastermind behind this matter was most likely the Gia sect. Tian let out a breath of turbid air, but his mood was not relaxed at all. He believed what Fan Zhong said, but he didn't think that the massacre was that simple. The Gia sect was indeed strong, but was it really strong enough to provoke the Fengtian Fate sect, the Wind Demons clan, and the Four-Sect Alliance at the same time? Or perhaps there was an even greater force behind the Gia sect. Hidden Neptune vaguely sensed that an invisible giant hand had already covered the entire sacred world of cultivators. Not the seventh sacred world of cultivators would not be peaceful. Chapter 4464. In the end, the three blades of the northern desert chose to leave before the Four-Sect Alliance arrived. The commotion was settled for now. Lung Shuang Wuchen signaled for the crowd to disperse and brought Nye Tian and the others to the meeting hall of Qingshan Peak. Field apart from the senior management of the Fengtian sect, the Beacon's Emperor, Devil's Knight, and Qing Qi were also present. Fan Zhong, come out! Lung Shuang Wuchen shouted with a stern face. His aura was intimidating. Even though Nye Tian had returned, Lung Shuang Wuchen was still in charge of the overall situation. Moreover, when Fan Zhong's incident happened, Nye Tian had yet to return. Hence, Lung Shuang Wuchen blamed himself for it. Fan Zhong's face was pale. He stood up and glanced at Nye Tian from time to time. Do you know what you've done? Lung Shuang Wuchen's face was dark. His anger made him look like a ferocious lion. I know what I've done. Fan Zhong lowered his head, and his voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Your crimes are unforgivable. Lung Shuang Wuchen's eyes were cold and murderous as he roared. Betraying the sect, colluding with external enemies, and attempting to overthrow the sect. Any one of these crimes was enough for Fan Zhong to die 10 times over. Sect leader. Fan Zhong could feel Lung Shuang Wuchen's murderous intent. His voice started to tremble. I know my crimes are unforgivable. I hope that Sect Master will give me a chance to redeem myself for my many years of dedication to the sect. Dedication? Redeem yourself? Lung Shuang Wuchen's eyes glowed coldly. He released an oppressive aura and roared. How dare you say that? Fan Zhong lowered his head even more, not daring to say another word. There was dead silence in the meeting hall. The atmosphere was heavy and suffocating. So after a long while, Lung Shuang Wuchen glanced at the crowd and spoke again. Everyone, what do you think? Everyone avoided him. No one wanted to speak. The matter was too important. It was too difficult to speak properly at this time. But only one person stood up. It was the Sealing Cloud Flag Master, Shun Yunhe. Lord Sect Master, Fan Zhong colluded with the outer sect to betray the sect. His crime is unforgivable. In my opinion, he should be executed in front of everyone to straighten out the people's hearts. Shun Yunhe's face was cold, and his aura was imposing. Lung Shuang Wuchen frowned and did not respond immediately. Instead, he paused and said, What do the others think? Of course, he knew that Fan Zhong and Shun Yunhe did not get along, and that Shun Yunhe could not wait for Fan Zhong to die. Therefore, Shun Yunhe's opinion was not of much use. Everyone fell silent once more. It was obvious that none of them wanted to speak. Before Lung Shuang Wuchen showed a clear attitude, no one dared to express their opinions. Sect Leader Lung, I have something to say, but I'm not sure if I should say it. After a while, Guling Wuji finally stood up. Even though he hadn't been in the sect for a long time, He was still the sect master, so his words still carried more weight. "Brother Guling, please speak." Lung Shuang Wuchen glanced at Guling Wuchi and said in a strange tone. The Feng Tian Fate sect was different from other sections. There were two sect masters in the sect. Although they looked equal on the surface, their actual power was different. Just like now, Guling Wuji had not been in the sect for a long time, and his status in the sect was much lower than Lung Shuang Wuchen. And moreover, the relationship between Lung Shuang Wuchen and Guling Wuji was not harmonious to begin with. Two, it wasn't that they had any personal grudges. It was just that they had many disagreements when it came to managing the sect. Very Guling Wuchi had left the Feng Tianming sect partly because of Lung Shuang Wuchen. Now Lung Shuang Wuchen naturally had a different feeling in his heart when he suddenly returned from Guling Wuji. And moreover, Lung Shuang Wuchen did not address Guling Wuchi as the sect leader. He seemed to be avoiding the latter's identity. Ancient Ling Wuchi didn't seem to be surprised. He smiled and said, "Although the Tianyue flag master's betrayal of the sect is a heinous crime, he has indeed contributed to the sect all these years. Moreover, Tianyue flag master admitted everything on his own initiative in front of the Northern Desert Three Blades, which means that he is sincerely repentant. Under such circumstances, I believe that the sect might as well be magnanimous and give Tianyue flag master a chance to turn over a new leaf." After that, Guling Wuji looked at Lung Shuang Wuchen, obviously observing the latter's reaction. Cold Shuang Wuchen's face was gloomy and cold. He seemed to be thinking about something. Sect leader Lung. At this moment, Nie Tian also stood up and said, "I already knew about Fan Zhong. I even made a private agreement with him that as long as he repents and turns over a new leaf, the sect will let bygones be bygones. However, I didn't know about the four-sect alliance back then. That's why I also feel that my decision was a bit rash. However, since I've already said it, it's not appropriate for me to take it back." Nie Tian paused and continued, "I have a suggestion now. Why don't we let Fan Zhong stay by my side for now? After all, the upcoming Sky Beacon selection will require a lot of manpower. Fan Zhong will also be able to confront the Ghost Cliff sect in the future," he said. After that, Nie Tian looked at Lung Shuang Wuchen and waited for the latter's response. Although he was the Beacon Emperor, Lung Shuang Wuchen was in charge of everything in the sect, so he had to respect the latter's decision. Lung Shuang Wuchen was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. Since the Beacon Emperor already had an agreement with Fan Zhong, then Fan Zhong's life will be in his hand for now. Fan Zhong immediately bowed and thanked Lung Shuang Wuchen when he heard that Lung Shuang Wuchen had finally agreed to it. Nie Tian's eyes flickered slightly as the heavy stone in his heart was finally lifted. Now Lung Shuang Wuchen was still in charge of the Sky Beacon sect. If he insisted on killing Fan Zhong, there was nothing Nie Tian could do. All right, Lung Shuang Wuchen was polite enough to Nie Tian and spared Fan Zhong's life. Otherwise, the atmosphere would definitely be awkward. Don't celebrate too early. Sparing your life doesn't mean you can escape punishment. Lung Shuang Wuchen looked at Fan Zhong coldly and said, "From now on, I will usurp your position as the flag overlord and order you to protect the Beacon Emperor. If anything happens to Sir Beacon King during the selection, we will hold you responsible." "That's right. Yes, yes, yes." Fan Zhong nodded repeatedly. Not only was he not upset, but he was also elated. Of previously, he was no longer a flag master, and he was also Nie Tian's bodyguard. However, after Lung Shuang Wuchen's announcement, it became official. Cold Shuang Wuchen shot a cold look at Fan Zhong, not the least bit relaxed. His original plan was to kill Fan Zhong no matter what. However, since Nie Tian had spoken, he had no choice but to take a step back. Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor he had found. If even he did not admit it, how could he expect others to admit it? Fan Zhong's matter was temporarily put to rest. Receiving Shuang Wuchen looked at Devil's Knight and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" He had noticed the presence of Devil's Knight earlier and was very puzzled. Why did this person look so similar to Nie Tian? Even their auras were similar. Straight his intuition told him that Devil's Knight's identity was definitely not ordinary. Feng Tian Soul Sect, Beacon Emperor. The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched into a faint smile. Chapter 4465. Devil's Knight revealed his identity with a playful smile. He looked at Lung Shuang Wuchen meaningfully. Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression changed when he heard the words Soul Sect, but it only lasted for a moment. Instead, he looked very calm. Nietian, he and Guling Wuji were surprised. They didn't expect Lung Shuang Wuchen to be so calm. It's surprising that Headmaster Lung is so calm. Devil's Knight's eyes darkened. He was also surprised. Beacon's Emperor, why did you come to the Fate Sect? Lung Shuang Wuchen looked indifferent, as if the Soul Sect and the Fate Sect had nothing to do with each other. Everyone's expression changed. Lung Shuang Wuchen seemed to want to chase Devil's Knight away. If that was the case, wouldn't the Fate Sect and the Soul Sect have a civil war before the Sky Beacon selection? Mo Devil's Knight frowned. He didn't expect Lung Shuang Wuchen to say that, but his expression remained calm. The Soul Sect and the Fate Sect are of the same origin. The Sky Beacon mountain range belongs to the Fengtian Sect, not the Fate Sect. As the Beacon's Emperor, it's not an exaggeration to say that I'm the master of the Sky Beacon mountain range. Why can't I come? Ever since the Soul Sect left the Sky Beacon mountain range, it has nothing to do with the Fengtian Sect and the Sky Beacon mountain range. Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression darkened. To the Fengtian Sect and the Fate Sect, you're most a guest now. A guest? Devil's Knight smiled and turned to Nietian. Then asked him if I'm a guest or a master. Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression darkened. He also turned to Nietian. Devil's Knight looked very similar to Nietian. Their relationship was obviously not ordinary. The Beacon's Emperor's return this time is to facilitate the unification of the Fengtian Sect. Nietian's face was a little embarrassed, but there were no outsiders present, so he didn't hide it and said, I think this is a good thing. As soon as his words fell, it immediately caused a heated discussion among the crowd. The Beacon's Emperor's sudden arrival is for the unification of the two sections. This is indeed a good thing. The Feng Tianming sect has been in decline for a long time. If we can unite with the Black Soul sect and return to the Feng Tian sect of the past, it will be a joyous occasion for the sect. However, this Beacon's Emperor's aura is not weak. Clearly, he is not someone who will bow down to anyone. I think he's probably here to fight for power. Yes, this fellow looks quite similar to our Beacon Emperor. Could he be Lord Beacon Emperor's brother? The hall was filled with the upper echelons of the Fengtian Fate sect. They spoke one after another without any taboo. Cold Shuang Wuchen's face was gloomy, as if he was thinking. After a while, he said, the Fate sect will naturally welcome the Black Soul sect's return, but if they want to dip their hands into the orthodox Fengtian sect, we will never agree. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. Lung Shuang Wuchen's reaction was within his expectations. He wanted to compete with Devil's Knight on equal footing, but Lung Shuang Wuchen obviously wouldn't agree. Cold Shuang Wuchen had painstakingly managed the Fengtian Fate sect for many years and had long regarded the heavenly Beacon Mountain Range as the sect's land of inheritance. How could he hand it over to someone else? Orthodox? When Devil's Knight heard these two words, he couldn't help but sneer. He said, it seems that in Sect Master Lung's eyes, the Fate sect is the orthodox Fengtian sect and represents the entire Fengtian sect, right? Isn't that so? Lung Shuang Wuchen also sneered and directly rebuked. When the Black Soul sect left the heavenly Beacon Mountain Range, it caused the Fengtian sect to split and the Fengtian sect to decline. You are the sinners of the Fengtian sect. It would not be an exaggeration to say that you are traitors of the sect. Knight's face instantly darkened, and he said indifferently, Sect Master Lung is really eloquent. But let me ask you, do you believe that the Black Soul sect is responsible for the decline of the Fengtian sect? Wasn't it your Fate sect that forced the Soul sect to leave? Lung Shuang Wuchen said coldly, there's no point in arguing. I respect you as the Beacon's Emperor and can let you go freely. As long as the members of the Black Soul sect never set foot on the Heaven Beacon Mountain Range, the Life sect can pretend that the Black Soul sect never existed. Devil's Knight sneered and said, In that case, this emperor should thank sect leader Long for his great kindness? Shuang Wuchen's face was cold as he said to Shun Yunhe, "Sect leader Shun, please send the guest off." Yunhe was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He stood up and said aggressively, "Beacon's emperor, please." Feeling Shun Yunhe's aura, Heaven's expression turned even uglier. It was obvious that if Devil's Knight did not leave, Shun Yunhe would attack. As one of the four flag masters of the Fontian Fate sect, Shun Yunhe was naturally very powerful. But Nye Tian had fought with Shun Yunhe before, and he knew that the latter's strength was comparable to that of the elders of the Gia sect. And Devil's Knight was the one who had refined the deputy sect master of the Gia sect into a soul puppet. If Shun Yunhe attacked, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Cold Shuang Wuchen and Shun Yunhe clearly did not know Devil's Knight's strength. Otherwise, they would not have been so overbearing. "What if I don't leave?" At this moment, Devil's Knight's expression changed. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, releasing a strange darkness and a chilling aura. At this moment, Devil's Knight's aura seemed to have changed. Even though he was very close to them, they could not see his face clearly. What kind of power is this? Everyone felt that something was wrong, and their expressions changed. Someone cried out, "Good boy. It seems that I have underestimated you." Shun Yunhe's expression darkened, but he was not afraid at all. With a low growl, his aura surged. He was about to attack. "Stop!" But at this moment, Nye Tian suddenly shouted. His figure moved, and he stood between Devil's Knight and Shun Yunhe. Seeing that it was Nye Tian, Shun Yunhe was unwilling, but he still withdrew his aura. He had already seen Nye Tian's strength, and he did not want to offend this young Beacon Emperor again. Devil's Knight looked at Nye Tian and frowned. He hesitated for a while, but eventually returned to normal. "Brat, consider yourself lucky." Shun Yunhe looked at Devil's Knight and sneered. As far as he was concerned, if Nye Tian hadn't stopped him just now, Mo, you would have already died in his hands. Devil's Knight did not even look at him. Instead, he locked his gaze on Nye Tian and said, Nye Tian, for your sake, I will let it go this time. The elders of the Soul sect will arrive in 3 days. Before they arrive, you better take care of the Life sect. Nye Tian frowned. He was in a dilemma. These are soul-cleansing pills. Let Tang 13 take one every day. It will be enough for him to survive. Devil's Knight did not give him time to react. He threw a bottle of pills at him and said, "I will leave first." As he finished speaking, his figure leaped forward like a ghost and instantly disappeared without a trace. Present everyone's eyes were focused on Nye Tian. The atmosphere was very strange. Chapter 4466. Omega, 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 choking with sobs. Novel in the main hall. Everyone looked at Nye Tian with strange expressions. Of course, Nye Tian could feel the strange atmosphere, but he didn't know what to say. It was obvious that everyone wanted to know what was going on between Nye Tian and Devil's Knight. However, due to his status, they couldn't ask him directly. Cough, cough. After a while, a dry cough broke the silence. It was Guling Wuji. He stood up and said, "I know about the Beacon's Emperor. If anyone has any questions, let I answer them." Everyone's eyes trembled. Many people turned to look at Guling Wuji, and their expressions became even stranger. Guling Wuji's identity was actually even more awkward than Nye Tian's. Although he was the sect leader, he had left the sect a long time ago. Not to say that he had separated himself from the sect, but his relationship with the sect had naturally become estranged. Now that he had suddenly returned to the sect, it would be very difficult for him to establish himself as the sect leader again. At the very least, it would be impossible for him to be on equal footing with Lung Shuangwuchen. He hadn't even explained his own affairs clearly, but now he came out to help Nye Tian, making people feel like he was a clay bodhisattva trying to save someone. However, the crowd was still wary of Guling Wuji's identity and did not say anything to his face. See, no one said anything. So Guling Wuji began to speak. He mainly talked about the situation at the Black Soul sect, the relationship between Devil's Knight and Nye Tian, and the prophecy he made when he visited the Black Soul sect. Deng, however, Guling Wuji did not reveal Devil's Knight's origins. After all, this was a rather secretive matter. After Guling Wuji finished speaking, Nie Tian also added on, including the gentleman's fight between him and Devil's Knight. After he finished speaking, the crowd immediately began to discuss. It turns out that after so many years, the Black Soul Divine sect has never given up. It seems like they've been scheming for a long time. Lord Beacon Emperor and the Beacon's Emperor, isn't it a little too reckless to decide on a gentleman's dispute? Although the people of the Black Soul sect weren't very strong, they were very proficient in formations, barriers, and prophecies. The Soul sect's prophecy regarding the Beacon Emperor couldn't be true, right? As he spoke, his expression became a little strange. Nyeheaven shook his head slightly and calmed down. He said in a clear voice, I made a private agreement with the Beacon's Emperor without discussing it with everyone else. It was indeed a little rash. However, this was also a decision that I had made after careful consideration. We still don't know the strength of the Soul Ancestor. However, I have witnessed the strength of the Beacon's Emperor with my own eyes. It's definitely beyond your imagination. Beyond imagination? Shin Yunha couldn't hold it in any longer and sneered. A mere ninth heaven tribulation holy king. Could it be that you're stronger than me? Obviously, he was still holding a grudge against Nie Tian for stopping him from attacking Devil's Knight. Does Flag Master Shin know Yin Qing? Nie Tian faintly smiled and asked. The vice sect master of the Gia sect? Shin Yunha was startled. He didn't know why Nie Tian suddenly mentioned Yin Qing. Yes, Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he asked, Flag Master Shun, do you think you're very strong compared to Yin Qing? Shin Yunha's expression sank. He paused for a moment and said, Yin Qing is the vice sect master of the Ghost Cliff sect. Even in the entire sacred world of 7 cultivators, he's a top-notch expert. I naturally can't compare to him. If you can't even compare to Yin Qing, how can you compare to the Beacon's Emperor? Nie Tianling smiled disdainfully. What do you mean? Shin Yunha furrowed his brows and said with an embarrassed smile, According to Lord Beacon Emperor, the Beacon's Emperor is stronger than the vice sect master of the Ghost Cliff sect. Shin Yunha wasn't unfamiliar with Yin Qing. Although he hadn't fought him before, he knew that the former was an expert in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm, and the Beacon's Emperor was only in the 9th level of the Heavenly Tribulation. The two of them were 2 levels apart. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the difference between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. If someone said that the Beacon's Emperor was stronger than Yin Qing, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. The crowd, everyone's expressions changed. They understood the meaning behind Nie Tian's words. When I visited the Wind Demon's clan, I happened to meet Yin Qing and the others from the Gia sect. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, The Wind Demon clan's leader suggested that the Fengtian sect and the Gia sect compete in 3 rounds. One of the 3 rounds was between the Beacon's Emperor and Yin Qing. Everyone's gazes instantly became heated, and they couldn't help but ask. Nie Tian glanced at everyone and said slowly, Yin Qing was defeated by the Beacon's Emperor. He couldn't fight back at all. In the end, he was even refined by the Beacon's Emperor into a soul lattice puppet. Everyone's eyes trembled violently. They all gasped and were stunned on the spot. A Saint King in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm defeated a Divine Ancestor in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm and even refined the latter into a puppet. This was too shocking. This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Shin Yunha was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly said, I think the Beacon Emperor is making up a lie to absolve himself. Everyone's expressions changed again, and they all looked at Shin Yunha. No matter what, Nie Tian was still the Beacon Emperor. Shin Yunha's words were blatantly disrespectful. Shin Yunha had already offended Nie Tian before. If he offended him again, would he still have a place in the Fengtian Fate sect in the future? Nie Tian was not angry at all. He had already expected Shin Yunha to say this. He smiled faintly and said, If you don't believe me, you can ask Fan Zhong. You can also ask the Wind Demon's clan. Do you think the Wind Demon's clan will ally with the Fengtian sect if we lose? Everyone's expressions froze. They didn't know what to say. With Nie Tian's status, he would not lie. However, Devil's Knight defeating Yinqing was simply subverting their understanding of the martial way. Pieces after a while, when everyone had calmed down a little, Nie Tian said, "This time, I represent the life sect in choosing to compete fairly with the soul sect. Although this is somewhat arbitrary, it is the best choice for the life sect. First of all, the sky beacon selection is imminent. If the fate sect chooses to break ties with the soul sect now, it means that an internal conflict is inevitable. This will undoubtedly have a great impact on the sky beacon selection. Even if the fate sect wins in the end, I'm afraid that their strength will be greatly reduced. Secondly, the soul sect is not as weak as we think. In my opinion, I even think that the overall strength of the soul sect has already surpassed that of the fate sect. Thirdly, the sky beacon selection has already attracted the attention of too many forces. When the time comes, many unexpected things will definitely happen. If the Fengtian sect wants to deal with all accidents, they must rely on the sky beacon formation. The soul sect is more familiar with the sky beacon formation than us. Lastly, the soul sect and the fate sect have been divided for too long. It is time for them to unite. In my opinion, after the unification of the Fengtian sect, whether it is the fate sect or the soul sect, it is a good thing for the entire sect. With that said, Nie Tian turned his gaze to Lung Shuang Wuchen and continued, "Sect leader Lung, I know that it is very difficult for you to accept the current situation. However, the Fengtian sect is currently in a precarious situation. At this time, if the two sects cannot work together, then there's only one outcome that awaits us: destruction." Lung Shuang Wuchen's expression was incomparably solemn, and his eyes were as deep as the abyss. "I support the decision of the Beacon Emperor." After a long time, Lung Shuang Wuchen finally opened his mouth and nodded heavily. Baidu search, 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 4467. In the meeting hall, Lung Shuang Wuchen finally agreed with Nie Tian's decision. This meant that the battle between the life sect and the soul sect had officially begun. 2 days later, at the Great Desolation Peak, Nie Tian and Tang 13 stood side by side in a hexagonal pavilion, looking at the other peak in the distance. "Tang 13, how are you feeling?" These days, Tang 13 had been taking a soul-cleansing pellet that Devil's Knight left behind. The soul of Yellow Spring in her body had stabilized and was no longer as violent as before. However, Nie Tian was still worried and asked, "The soul of Yellow Spring has been suppressed. In at most half a month, I will be back to normal." Tang 13 smiled faintly. Seeing Nie Tian's nervousness, she joked, "I didn't think that Devil's Knight would give you the soul-cleansing pellet so easily. It seems like he is just like you. He cares about me." Nie Tian smiled bitterly, but didn't say anything. Demon Nie Tian also felt strange that Knight would give up the soul-cleansing pellet so easily. Just for the sake of a joint breakthrough, Devil's Knight gave up Tang 13, his trump card. At first, Nie Tian suspected that there was something wrong with the soul-cleansing pellet that Devil's Knight gave, but he had no choice but to let Tang 13 take it. Who knew that the soul-cleansing pellet could really suppress the soul of Yellow Spring? And until now, it had not caused any harm to Tang 13. Maybe Devil's Knight really wanted a breakthrough. In these 10 days, Nie Tian had tried to break through, but every time he was beaten back by the Hidden Heavens perception barrier. Look, if he didn't cooperate with Devil's Knight, it would be very difficult for him to break through to the Heavens perception realm. Have you thought about the 3 people who will compete in the gentleman's competition? Tang 13 saw that Nie Tian did not speak and asked, "Not yet." Nie Tian couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He knew a lot of young, genius martial artists. He had quite a few disciples, but it was difficult to contact Duanmu Lu and the others. Moreover, Nie Tian guessed that the strength of Duanmu Lu and the others would not be too strong. It was unlikely that they would be able to confront the people chosen by Devil's Knight. Nie Tian had a few candidates in mind, such as Earth Destruction Star Monarch Jun Jianxing, the ancient sacred race's prodigy, Xie Tianquang, the Xiantian sword embryo swordsman Yu Jingchen, the former Hidden Heavens champion Fu Tian Jushi, and even the Feng Tian Fate sect's first disciple, Wen Luan. However, among these people, there were a few whose whereabouts were uncertain. He might not be able to contact them, and even if he managed to contact them, they might not be able to rush over in time. The Shura clan has some geniuses as well. I can ask a few of them for you to choose from. Tang 13 knew what Nie Tian was worried about. She said, "If there is no other choice, I can fight." Nie Tian waved his hand and said, "The person chosen by Devil's Knight must be a top genius. I'm afraid the intensity of the 3 battles won't be any weaker than the Hidden Heavens competition. Though there are many geniuses in the Shura clan, there might not be anyone who can handle this level of intensity. Your body is not stable yet, so it's best if you don't participate." Tang 13 bitterly smiled, her face full of helplessness. The Shura clan did have some geniuses, but almost none of them could meet Nie Tian's requirements. In the Hidden Heavens competition, other than Tang 13, only Sha Qianqiu of the Shura clan entered the top 8. The people Nie Tian wanted must be geniuses who could compete with him. Even if they couldn't compete, they couldn't be too far behind. Don't worry, the battles will have to wait until after the Sky Beacon selection. There's still time. Nie Tian didn't want Tang 13 to worry, so he smiled and pointed at a mountain gate opposite of him. "Look over there, that hidden valley. Behind it is the 6th Sun Peak, the final location of the Sky Beacon selection. I heard from Grandmaster Qing Shi that the 6th Sun Peak is the forbidden peak of the Sky Beacon mountain range. It can't be damaged. Why was it chosen there?" Tang 13 frowned and asked. "It's precisely because the 6th Sun Peak is so important that it was chosen." Nie Tian smiled and said, "I just asked. More than 1 million people have signed up for the Sky Beacon selection. This is even after increasing the registration limit. Aside from the cultivators from the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators, nearly 80% of the applicants are from other sacred worlds. Therefore, the Sky Beacon selection is no longer just a matter of the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. It has alarmed the entire sacred world. In addition, the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators is extremely important. When the time comes, there will definitely be big forces intervening. In order to deal with unexpected situations, the final location of the Sky Beacon selection was chosen to be the 6th Sun Peak." As Nie Tian spoke, he looked around and smiled. "Actually, the Great Desolation Peak we are at right now is also a forbidden peak. Although this location is remote, it is directly opposite the 6th Sun Peak. Moreover, it is very close to the guards of the 6th Sun Peak, so it is very important. I asked Senior Guling to open the Great Desolation Peak so that we can better observe the 6th Sun Peak." 13 nodded and smiled. "It looks like we're really going to have a big battle this time." Beacon Emperor. As the two of them spoke, Guling Wuji arrived and bowed to Nie Tian respectfully. "Senior Guling, you don't have to be so polite. Just call me Nie Tian." Nie Tian laughed and asked, "How is the 6th Sun Protection Formation?" For the past few days, Guling Wuqi and Qing Qi had been assisting the elders of the Black Soul sect in building the 6th Sun's Protection Formation to protect the 6th Sun's Peak. About 7 days ago, 3 elders of the Soul Divine sect arrived, and their strength was actually not weaker than Guling Wuji and the others. From this, it could be seen that the overall strength of the Soul sect might not be inferior to that of the Life sect. Not really, moreover, the elders of the Black Soul Divine sect had brought with them all the materials needed to build the Great Formation. Even the blueprint of the formation had been completed a long time ago. Ancient Ling Wuqi and Qing Qi were only assisting to ensure that there were no problems with the formation. It's almost done. It'll be completed in 3 days at most. Elder Wang, Elder Qin, and Elder Sima are all formation experts. I and Qing Qi only need to assist from the side. Guling Wuji was a little excited. Everything has been prepared. It looks like Devil's Knight has set his sights on Sixyang Peak in advance. Tang 13 laughed. She did not hold back and said directly, "I think Devil's Knight's motive for choosing Sixsun's Peak is not simple." Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he asked, "Senior Guling, you and Senior Qing Qi have been keeping an eye on the 6th Sun Protection Array. Is there any problem?" Ling Wuqi naturally understood what Nye Tian was asking and said, "There's absolutely no problem with the 6 Sun Protection Grand Formation. I and Qing Qi have been keeping a close eye on it. No matter how brilliant the 3 elders of the Soul Sect are, they can't hide from our eyes. Don't worry, Beacon Emperor." "That's good." Nye Tian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He believed in Guling Wuqi and Qing Qi's vigilance. Ancient Ling Wuqi smiled faintly and continued, "Headmaster Lung is almost done with his work. All the applicants have been arranged, and we're just waiting for the Sky Beacon selection to begin." "Have a venues for the primary and combat selections been chosen?" Nye Tian asked in a much more relaxed manner. "Everything has been chosen. Everything needed for the preliminary and martial selections has been prepared as well." Guling Wuqi nodded with a smile and said, "We're just waiting for the day of the Sky Beacon selection to be opened. Then, Beacon Emperor will light the 9 Heavens Beacon fire." Nye Tian nodded in satisfaction with a gratified expression. The Sky Beacon selection was only 5 days away, and everything was ready.